Hello everyone and welcome to this Nintendo Life episode bonus, extra, additional, DLC content. Hello, I'm MBZ, that's my name. This is a podcast that I do. I've not been on it in a while because I've been in Japan, and I haven't talked to Bally in a little while either. And that streak will continue because I'm not joined by Bally today. I'm instead joined by friend of the show, roguelike master, Metroid lover, Devon. Welcome back to the show. How's it going?
Thank you. It's good to be back. It's been a while. Was the last one Last of Us 2? I think that's the last one.
Yeah,
maybe?
I think maybe on the show, definitely. Last time we spoke was in LA, like a year ago, basically. Yeah. So yeah, that was cool. I went out to GDC, and then I had some extra time, so I was like, let's explore the west coast of America and what it looks like. And so I went to LA, which, as I've talked about on this show, I'm not the biggest fan of LA generally as a city.
Me neither, and I live here, so.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. A testament, a resident also with the same opinion. But obviously, you're out there, and so we hung out in the Japan.
Little Tokyo, yeah.
Little Tokyo.
That was a good time. I had a lot of fun that day.
Yeah,
that was fun.
Yeah, it was really good. Gave me a little taste of Japan before I went to the real thing, which was.
Yeah, we got good food. Good. That was a good meal.
Yeah, absolutely, really, really good stuff. But yeah, we're back here to talk about video games, but mainly it's all about a little game. It's called Hades 2. Don't know if you heard of it. It's tearing up the charts right now. I wanted to do this, I think, because obviously Bally's not going to have any chance to play this game until it comes to a console and not a computer. And I think, from our audience perspective, Hades is a very important game generally, but I think also it saw most of its success on Switch, on people playing it handheld, right? And I think that is where it finds its home. I've been playing a lot of Hades 2 on Steam Deck, right? That is a good place for it also. I just wanted to chat about it, and who better than the guy who introduced me to roguelikes, I guess, in a way. And I know you're a massive fan of Hades as well, Devon, so I thought it'd be good to get you on and we can go deep on it and have a good chat about it. First of all, I just wanted to check in and see how things are going with you and what other games you've been checking out in the last how many years that you've been on the show.
I've been playing a lot more lately because I think we've talked a little bit personally in the last few years. I think with just day-to-day life, working and everything, I've kind of gone down the live service rabbit hole, which I'm not proud of.
Well, you became a Genshin and Honkai sicko, right?
Yes, I still am. We could talk about those a little bit. I mean, Honkai Star Rail,
yeah.
You've played, I know. Honkai Star Rail.
I played a lot, yeah. I think I've put 30 hours.
Yeah. No. Honkai Star Rail is a fantastic game. Genshin is a great game with a ton of baggage, and obviously, Honkai Star Rail is still a gacha, so there's still some baggage there, but I think there's way less baggage in Honkai Star Rail than there is in Genshin. The story is I don't know how far you are, but this recent sort of story arc has just finished up. I have to play the last chapter there. They just did it, I think, about 2 weeks ago, but this whole story arc has been genuinely really good, which kind of surprised me. The storytelling's really interesting.
Even the first narrative arc of Honkai.
Yeah, the Belobog. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I thought that was really well. It's very.
It was.
It's very tropey, I guess, right? It's, the rich people live above and the poor people live below, and then you have these characters interact, and I really like, what are the names? The characters are going to elude me, but Ice Lady, who's who's up
Bronya.
Above, and then Bronya, Bronya, and what's the
Seela,
the other one you just said? Yeah, Seela. They're the way those two characters.
They've got a great dynamic.
Exactly, the way they come together and the way they communicate, I thought was really strong. And I actually think the story in Honkai for me is a lot stronger than what I've experienced in Genshin. Genshin for the most part, I don't know what the fuck is going on really, and I'm just okay, Paimon is talking a lot, and I don't know things. Archons, I don't really understand. But Honkai, I think, actually had a bit more grounding in a real interesting kind of story about class initially. So like I think that like I'm very interested to continue with that. And I think I'm just at the beginning of like the second area, so I'm still quite far behind. But I do want to catch up on it because I think it's cool.
Second area is not quite as strong, but this third area has been awesome. Without spoiling too much, it goes from, being, as you said, like a relatively simple story about class, which is still cool, to this new area being about like dreams and also mortality and accepting your own mortality. Everything, which
Great.
I was not prepared for, but it's cool. It's well done. They're introducing a lot more lore stuff, so it is getting a little bit closer to that Genshin territory. My biggest problem with the Hoyo games is if you're like paying half attention at the wrong point, they're gonna start throwing around like sci-fi fantasy BS buzzwords, and it's like, I don't know what you're speaking a different language right now.
Yeah, there's a lot of that actually. Like, I think it's definitely a bit of a barrier to entry, especially like the beginning of Honkai. I'm like, what the fuck is happening? I just don't understand. Like, it's very in media res.
What the hell is a Stellaron?
Yeah, like I don't even really know what a Stellaron is still to this day, but I mean, it's a word and it's important, I guess. But yeah, I think if you can get past that, the actual character driven parts of the story, I think, are quite strong. So I do think that that's I think that if you have been wary of these games, you're like, oh, that seems like some anime nonsense. Yes, it is, but there's also a lot of cool stuff in there, I think, narratively. So
and any game without Paimon, that's a thumbs up for me. No Paimon in the game.
So I found in Japan there was an anime figure gallery, they called it. It was mainly just lots of, let's say, voluptuous anime ladies with like statues that were very well crafted, let's say. But in that gallery, there was a statue of Paimon proudly displayed. And so I did take a picture of Paimon because obviously we must all praise our Lord and Master.
Right, yeah.
In this guy. So, yeah.
The true Archon of Genshin.
The real, I don't know, man. I just like, there's this thing where I remember starting Genshin and being like, okay, this character's kind of annoying. And then I just went through a whole arc of being like, shut the fuck up. And then I eventually got round to the place where I'm like, actually, the writing is just really funny, especially with like your responses to Paimon.
Yeah.
I think is some of the funniest, like your own character who's not voiced, but you choose responses for. Those responses to Paimon, I think, are some of the funniest writing in the whole game. So I think there's a benefit to Paimon's existence in the end. But no March 7th, right? That's all I'm gonna say.
No March 7th or Danhun. Like the side characters, I like a lot more in Star Rail. Yes. But yeah, no, it's a great game, and I think it's a lot more free to play friendly than Genshin
That's good.
is.
Yeah.
I mean, they just did. You grabbed it, right? They just did I think it's ending soon, or may have just ended.
Dr. Ratio or whatever his name is.
Dr. Ratio.
Yeah.
Dr. L plus Ratio.
Hey, if you want to play a game with a character's called March 7th and another character's called Dr. Ratio, well, do we have the game for you?
Yes. Dr. Ratio is actually great as a character. I mean, he's very strong gameplay-wise, but his like story presence, especially in this new story arc, he's great. I really enjoy him. But yeah, they did a limited 5-star for free, which they've never done before.
Yeah, my one reticence with Dr. Ratio is that I already have Welt, and Welt kind of covers my my elemental, because he's the same elemental as
Right, they're both imaginary. Yeah,
exactly. And Welt's really good. He's definitely carried my team a lot, which has been good. But yeah, I do want to get back to that stuff. But there's lots of video games out there to be playing right now.
There are a lot of video games.
Yes. So yeah, what else have you been checking out?
Yeah, one I gotta shout it out. I'm sure you guys have mentioned it on the show at some point, but Balatro has been incredible. I adore Balatro. If people listening to the show haven't checked it out, which I'd imagine a lot of people probably have, but if they haven't, Balatro is. I mean, it's my game of the year at this point. It's still May when we're recording this, so who knows what will happen. But it's an outstanding video game. I almost feel like I don't have that much to say about it, but it's just like so well crafted and fun, and it's one of those games. I was saying this to a friend recently. Was it you? I don't remember if it was you, but Balatro is one of those games where it's like I can play it for an entire evening after work, or if I'm work people don't listen to this, but if I'm, trying to procrastinate for 30 or 40 minutes, I can play Balatro and have played 40 minutes of that game and also feel satisfied, if that makes sense. It's just it's a perfect night eater and also drop in, drop out. It's an incredible game.
Yeah, I mean, so I've instituted a policy on the show that I just don't say anything about it, just for a conflict of interest reason.
Fair enough.
But no, I appreciate all the kind words about it, and we've certainly. I mean, I have plugged it a lot, obviously, being involved, but it's just there's lots of cool stuff happening with that video game, and
there is.
It's been surreal seeing what has been going on with it. But no, I appreciate you kind of saying all that stuff, especially because I think, like, one of the things I said to you was I don't think I would have really gotten into that style of game had it not been for you pushing me to play Slay the Spire back in the day, which was very helpful when I was assessing a game like Balatro to look at it for publishing. So shout outs for that, absolutely.
Thank you.
Because that definitely set me on a path.
No, I know, and it'll fit into Hades later, because Hades was another one of those games very similar to Slay the Spire, where I got in on the Hades early access, and I was like, holy shit, this is, like, incredible. Why aren't people talking about it? And then inevitably they did once the 1.0 came out. But yeah, that was a that was a nice moment, because I felt justified in my thought. I'm like, thank you, people see how good this is.
Yeah, definitely.
What else have I been playing? I've only done a very small amount of it, but I have been playing Animal Well as well. I've only played about an hour. I think you said you just picked it up, or you're about to pick it up, right?
I did. I picked it up, I think, on Friday evening or Thursday evening, I want to say.
That's around when I got it too.
I'm about 2.5 hours in, I think. Hard to tell,
How do you feel about it?
I've got it. So, I like it so far. I think it's interesting. I don't think I've hit that point of, like, crazy, like, puzzle depth stuff that I know that a lot of people are chatting about it with. I think it's that weird thing of coming into a game with expectations already built in, where everyone online is like, it's a masterpiece.
Yeah.
But I think to get to that point with the game, I think you probably have to put quite a bit of time into it. So I'm kind of at that stage at the moment where I'm like, there's lots of interesting stuff going on here. I think it's very cool and unique and interesting and different.
It's beautiful too. Art style, gorgeous.
Yes, absolutely. And just like, I believe he built his own engine for it as well and everything.
He did.
So it's got a lot of custom stuff in there, like the way in which things move, like on Switch specifically, if you just move your finger across the touchscreen, all the like branches and vines will move.
What?
I saw online.
That's cool.
Yeah, I saw online, if you put it in windowed mode on PC and start shaking the window around on the desktop, all those will move as well. And I'm like, I have no idea if that is supposed to be used for a meta puzzle or something, but it's an incredibly cool detail. And I think that stuff is very interesting and just makes me think about the possibilities of what it could be. But at the moment, I don't know. I mean, I have like 4 of the items so far, and there's some interesting stuff that I've done with them, and I figured out things to do with them that I'm not sure what I should be using those for yet. But yeah, I think the kind of core critical path stuff so far has been cool. How have you been finding it?
So as I said, I'm only about an hour in, but I am really enjoying it. The some of the puzzles and just exploration, I mean, I was prepared for what I was getting into, and the fact that there's no dialogue, there's no, this is where you need to go. But it is still kind of shocking when you actually play the game. It's like, oh my God, they really just throw you in this world and say, do things in whatever order you want. I really like the items. I guess I'll mention the item that I've gotten just because I think it's been in trailers and everything. From what I understand, there are some items and stuff later on they haven't showed off, but I think this is on the table. I got the Slinky. Have you had the Slinky yet? That's such a cool item. I really like how that one works. It's very creative.
It's really interesting. Yeah, and I think I feel like all these items are non-traditional, right? And
yes,
they are things that you haven't seen in any game before, really. And their functions are totally weird and unique. And I think that opens up the thinking and possibility space, because you don't know what the traditional application for this is, and so are there other applications that you haven't thought of, right? In traditional Metroidvanias, you're going to get a grappling hook. Okay, cool. You know exactly what that is. You know what it'll do. You know how it'll function. In this game, you get a slinky, and you're like, okay, what? Like, what the fuck? How's that going to help me, right? Which I think is also just it makes it feel fresh, and I think that's a really good thing, because I think Metroidvanias generally, and we both play a lot of them, they fall into those same tropes of like, oh, you're going to get a double jump, right? Like, it's part of the game. And I think this resisting that just makes it a little bit more interesting generally. So
no, absolutely.
Was that the first item you got, by the way? Because I've been
that was the first one.
Chatting on Discord. Okay, that's fascinating.
I think a lot of people got the disc first, right? From what I've seen.
There's like I got a completely different item that no one else in the TNL Discord said that they got first, and there's another one that other people have got. Like, the order that everyone is getting this stuff in is completely different, and I find that really fascinating, because I eventually got to one of the items people were talking about, and I was like, oh wow, you just figured this out much earlier than me and were much smarter than me, because I got to a room where you're supposed to go and find a thing, and I was like, I don't know what to do here, I'll come back later. Whereas I imagine other people figured that out instantly and then went and got a totally different item in a totally different part of the map to me. And so yeah, I've not yet come across anyone who came across the item I came across first, so it feels like there's a lot of different ways you can approach this, which is very, very
I
cool.
think everyone's calling this game a Metroidvania, which it absolutely shares a ton of DNA with, but I think in a lot of ways it's super similar, and this is true of other Metroidvanias, but this game has a lot in common with almost like a big Zelda dungeon, if that makes sense, and the way that the items are used to me are closer to Zelda than Metroid, because as you said, listen, I love Metroid, this is not me complaining, but you get something like, I don't know, the wave beam in some of the games, and sometimes it's like, okay, you do 1 point more of damage and can open purple doors.
Right.
Like, that's what the item does, right? But in this game, there's a lot more utility for these items, and from what I've seen online, I've not gone into spoiler stuff, but I've watched some reviews and things. All of these items have hidden purposes that are not initially apparent, and I guess it changes how you play the game on subsequent playthroughs and things. I'm curious to see how that goes, but Animal Well, it's a game that has, for me, it's got a lot of potential. I got to put the time in more, but I'm intrigued. It's one of the more interesting games I've played in a while. I always appreciate when something comes like this that just feels, just totally different from everything else, right? It's there's nothing else like this coming out right now.
Yeah, I've heard the term Metroid Brainia get thrown around a lot, which I like.
I've heard that too. I've heard people. Yeah, I've heard people call Obra Dinn that, which I guess sort of makes sense. Some other games.
But I think this is because there's no combat, right? It is just a kind of explore and figure things out type of game. It definitely has a different feel to it. And yeah, I think to some degree, I bemoan that lack of kind of movement, and because for me, the joy of Metroidvanias in a lot of instances is becoming more powerful and going faster through a space and learning that space and fighting things and killing them quicker as you go through. And this doesn't really have that. So I do kind of view it in a different kind of lens in a way. And I think that it's probably the best way to look at it, because I think comparing it to an Ori or a Hollow Knight or a Metroid Dread, it's not quite the same thing. This has more in common with Fez or with Tunic, games that are contemplative and puzzle solving focused, really.
Yes. So I gotta play Tunic. So, yeah. I've heard good things about
you really
that
do. I also recommend, if so this was a tip someone in the Discord was mentioning, but hold down the jump button for 5 seconds. Just do that next time you play the game. Okay. It's a little fun little nod. It's worth just doing. It's not like a big spoiler or anything.
Yeah,
just hold down the jump button for a few seconds.
I'll try that.
See what happens. Yeah. So it's fun stuff like that, right? Which I really appreciate, and I think the solo dev Billy Basso has said that he hopes that people are still looking for secrets in this game in 20 years time, which I think says that he's probably put a lot of stuff deep within this.
It's how it feels.
It's going to take people some time to figure out.
Well, shout out to Donkey as well. He did it. It's not his personal game, but they did it. they got a real
Yeah.
winner on their hands, which is good for them.
Absolutely. Yeah, definitely.
Um,
So very, very interested to see where that goes as I get further into it. And I'm sure I know Bally's playing it as well, so we'll talk about it next time. Go a bit
yeah,
more in
yeah.
depth. So good stuff.
I got a few others I
Yeah,
could shout out here. Just looking
yeah.
at
Go
my.
for it. Yeah.
So I've been feeling the Souls itch with the Elden Ring DLC and everything coming up. And
Mm-hmm.
the one Souls game I have not really played really at all was Dark Souls 3. And I was like, you know what, I'm gonna play Dark Souls 3. And then after like a week or two, I had beaten it. And
Wow.
yeah, Dark Souls 3 that's a good game. I
Yeah.
don't know why I waited so long.
I've heard a lot of good things about it. I mean, I think my journey with Souls is very one note because I've only played Elden Ring, but I am
That's
looking
right.
for like what's the next one I want to play, and I don't like I've been looking at Liza P as well and being like that aesthetic speaks to me a bit more than Bloodborne's
I've
does.
heard good things
Personally.
about it. Yeah.
Yeah, so and Stellar Blade came out and people are saying that's kind of like Devil May Cry meets a Souls game in a way. It's more slow and methodical. So there's a lot of these types of games coming out, and I do want to dive into. I feel like before I play those imitators, I probably should just go back and play the original. So I do want to give the original Dark Souls a shot at some point, I think.
Yeah, OG Dark Souls is incredible. There's some stuff in that game, in particular in the back half, that is. I mean, this is no secret. There's some areas that were not totally finished, and one boss fight in particular that I think everybody hates because it's probably the worst fight in one of these games. But Dark Souls 1, just as like a world building experience and kind of the blueprint for everything that was to come, is really good. Dark Souls 3, on the other hand, it's not quite as open as a game like Dark Souls 1, but it's really really refined. It's I don't know, it's a great game. It's got some of the best boss fights in the series, I think. I really enjoy the boss fights. The level design, some of the level design is awesome. There's still, classic Miyazaki Poison Swamp. Those are not my favorite areas, but the man,
Yeah, that stuff
he
sucks,
can't help
especially
himself.
like I think there was one boss in Elden Ring where it was like inside a poison swamp, and I was
Yeah.
like, "Fuck this! Why did you do this to me?" You know?
Have you seen him in interviews? He's talked about it. He loves it. He just loves poison swamps for some reason. That's his that's his comfort place. I don't
Yeah,
know.
yeah. Respect it, Respect the man.
Yeah.
Um,
The boss fights in that game are some of them are truly incredible. And for me, I don't know what your experience was like playing Elden Ring, but the boss fights a lot of the times are the highlight of the game because it's the
Yeah.
spectacle to the absolute max, along with really getting to it's an arena to play around with the combat and show how good you are at dodging attacks, understanding attacks, knowing when to get hits in. It's a ton of fun.
Yeah, those are just always amazing, and I think the variety and breadth of them in Elden Ring especially was just like remarkable.
yeah.
I think for me as well, the thing for me that stood out because I hadn't played From Software games before was just the intricacy of level design in those games and how interconnected and interweaving everything is. Because it really is, like, at the end of the day, like Metroid-like, I would say, Souls game design.
Oh, absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
There's
Yeah.
less of that in Elden Ring because of the openness of the space, but when you do get to like a specific place, like that first castle, you're like, oh wow, this is really well thought out and paced, and like the pressure you feel and just the tension of getting to a save point every single time is just really really super well done. So, and that stood out a lot. But
Well, if you like that, I mean, that's what like Dark Souls is. It's
Yeah.
if you look like the castles and dungeons in Elden Ring, it's just that, but for 40 hours, and that's the game.
the whole game, yeah.
Like
Yeah, exactly.
so it's pretty good.
Yeah.
You should
Yeah.
play. I know you're not a horror guy, but Bloodborne is still my favorite of all those games.
Yeah,
Bloodborne is so good.
like Bloodborne is the one where I look at it and I'm like, I think that is just too scary for me. But one day, I think when it comes to PC and you get a 60 frames version or whatever, I think I think a lot of
please.
people will be talking about it. And
They have to do
don't
it,
know.
right? I mean, after all this,
Yeah.
like, they have to do it.
well, yeah, I think like the thing is, Bloodborne also is a great kind of Castlevania adjacency as well, which is something
That's true.
that I am a big fan of. So I don't know if I can get over just like some of the aesthetic stuff that in 3D I find a bit scary, then maybe I'll get to it. But yeah, I think I probably want to go through the Dark Souls trilogy first.
Yeah, I would describe it as more creepy than scary, because there actually are,
Okay.
but this is the case in Elden Ring and Dark Souls too. There is a jump scare in the sense of the word, where you go behind the enemy, or go behind a doorway and there's an enemy waiting there to
They just jump out at
backstab
you,
or something.
yeah,
Which is more just a level design thing. But
yes,
I feel like if you can handle something like Elden Ring, especially with how some of those creatures and bosses and stuff look towards the end of the game, like I think Bloodborne should be fine.
Yeah, we'll see. I think Elden Ring definitely is. It's girded my loins, so I feel like I'm ready to take on some bigger, scarier stuff. But I don't know, I think it was always the fantasy kind of like element of Elden Ring that connected with me. So I just wonder how that's gonna transfer over with some of these others. But the gameplay is a core reason of why I love that game as well. So I think it's something that I would be willing to explore, and I think I will eventually. But
I'm pumped for the DLC.
Yeah, gotta find the time.
Really, really excited for Elden Ring DLC.
Yeah, I need to check and see if my character's all good to go, because otherwise I need to like download a save from somewhere and get that ready, because I don't want to be replaying Elden Ring just to get to the DLC, which is, I think, the awkward thing about these games sometimes is they're like, oh yeah, you need to have all this stuff, and yeah, but at least I'm on PC, so if I do need to download like an endgame save and then just go and modify my character to be what it was like at the end of my actual game, then so be it. But
I have it on PS5, but I think I want to pick it up on PC at some point, because the PS5 version does not really run particularly well. So playing it on PC, I'd prefer.
No, I mean, that game was infamous for not running great when it came out. Like, it was, even on PC, it had like hitching problems and stuff like that. So yeah, it's a bit of a shame, but yeah, very much looking forward to that DLC when it does drop. So I'll be jumping in.
I got one more, I guess I could talk about.
All right.
Well, briefly, I tried out Yakuza 0. I'm like an hour and a half in, but I'm
okay.
enjoying
All right.
I'm really
That's
excited to play more.
Very, very glad to hear that. That is, it's a good start to a journey.
No, you, Darren from my podcast, everyone said you would love this shit. It is right up your alley, and I don't know, just never gotten into it, but I'm enjoying it so far. Excited to see where it goes. The other one I've been playing recently is. And I think I saw it. Do you have this game? I think I remember seeing you do.
Okay.
You do. Have you played Dredge?
I have not played it yet. No. I've heard lots of good things about it, but I do want to check it out. It seems very interesting.
It's first of all, it's beautiful. The art style is gorgeous. I can't believe that game looks as good as it does. But that's a game I've been playing with my partner. Just certain nights, she'll text me and ask me to play something, and I'll just stream it over Discord while she's at home, and we'll play it together. And it's been a great game to do that sort of thing with, where you're playing it sort of with a companion. She knows the game a little bit because I think she's seen certain YouTubers and stuff play it, so she has some knowledge, and I think she's enjoying me, walk into areas and die and not know what's happening and stuff like that. But it's really cool. It's, how do I describe Dredge? You like Wind Waker, right?
Yeah, I'm a huge fan of Wind Waker. I mean, Bally is the Wind Waker guy on the show, right? But I played a lot growing up, and obviously
he might like it then. It's got a lot of Wind Waker DNA.
Yeah, I mean, so he really loves a game called Moonglow Bay. I don't know if you've heard of that, but that is a fishing game that's almost it's almost Stardew Valley adjacent. I would say it's a fishing focused one of those where you have a town, you come back to it, and you build up the town, but you're also going out and you're fishing, and it has a cool kind of loop to it. Dredge feels like what if that, but if it was dark and had some strange stuff going on, basically.
It is like that. It's more, so it's less of a fishing game. As much as the fishing kind of feels like, oh, this is a fishing game when you start the game. As you play it more, the fishing is more of a little mini game activity thing to do in the background. It's more of a it's a time management game, similar to something I don't know what, it's not like this game at all, but similar to something like Stardew Valley, where you're trying to make those decisions. It's okay, today I can go to the mines or whatever, but if I don't go to the mines, I can't talk to people around town, or start building my new farm, something like that. So you have to make
Mm-hmm.
decisions like, this is what I'm going to do today. But it's also, I mean, very much like Zelda or Wind Waker, it's an adventure game where you're going to these different islands and meeting different people. There's different side quests and things. There's hidden objectives. There's almost like heart piece-esque collectible sort of things around the place. It's really, really cool. And I don't know. It's one of those games I have been enjoying playing just like an hour or two at a time instead of kind of binging
Right.
through. It's been nice to take it at like a leisurely pace, but it's awesome. It's a really, really cool game, and I'm excited. These games in my mind are connected because they came out around the same time. I think they even did like a package deal. That's how I bought it. Dave the Diver as well. We were talking about that before
Yes.
the show started. I'm
Yeah.
excited to check that one out too, because I think they're almost two sides of the same coin. You've got Dave the Diver, the like,
Right.
I don't know, a little bit more like casual kind of, oh, this is fun, gonna be a sushi chef or whatever it is in
Mm-hmm.
that game, and then Dredge, the adventure game. You're going around. It's very dark and moody. Yeah.
Yeah, very very appropriate that they also just had a DLC crossover that happened with
Yes.
both those games, right? So yeah, they really took advantage of it. That last year, right? It was I feel like maybe were those the only two kind of like in the water type of games, maybe, but they definitely
that I know
they made
of,
it made
yeah.
a yeah, they made a good show of it, of doing a collaboration, because there's a good synergy, I think, between those games and the audiences as well for them. So yeah, no, I mean, it sounds really, really good. I think both of those are on both mine.
Do you like Phantom Hourglass?
I enjoyed Phantom Hourglass a good amount. I think the thing that brings Phantom Hourglass down, of course, is the dungeon
Ocean Temple?
repetition of doing it again and again. But the overworld exploration and like the actual other stuff is really good in that game. I think it's excellent. So
Right, it's all that. It's no Ocean Temple. It's all like going around finding out
Yeah.
secrets. Because the thing I really like about Phantom Hourglass is there's a lot wrong with those DS Zelda games that makes it not as desirable to come back to after you've played them the first time. But the puzzles in those games are like killer. Some of the best in the series, I think.
They're really
And
good.
That's
I mean, there's the obvious one where you have to fucking close the lid, which I ran across where I'm like, what the fuck do I do? So I closed my DS. I went online to look it up, and I realized, and then I opened my DS, and the puzzle was solved. I was like, oh. Okay, so I wonder how many people had that experience of just like closing it and then looking up the answer and then opening it and the puzzle was done for them. Must be quite a few people.
I remember as well, like, do you remember when you're going to the second dungeon area? I think in that game you have to like find that tablet, and it tells you the specific path that you have to draw your ship to go on to like loop around certain rocks and stuff to go through the fog. That I love.
Do you remember that? Yeah. That stuff is super cool.
So that's the DNA that's in Dredge. I'd say it's closer to something like that than doing the Temple of the Ocean King for the 5th time or whatever.
Right. Yeah. No, that sounds great.
There's no Linebeck though, so
Oh god damn it! Fuck. I mean, he's the best Zelda character.
He was the best.
God,
Absolutely
fucking
is.
Linebeck. Man, I've not thought about Linebeck in a long time. Jesus, it's bringing back some memories.
Linebeck for Smash 6 or whatever.
Yeah, is he? He's like a sticker or whatever the fuck in the new one, right? Like I'm sure he exists there
so.
somewhere. Yeah. Well,
miss
that's great.
trophies.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, both Bally and myself are interested in both of those games, and I think we'll get to them eventually at some point.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think it's probably time to dive on in to some Hades 2. Before we chat about the game itself, maybe talk about like history with the original game. You mentioned previously that like you got in day one essentially. Was it like after that announcement of the Game Awards, or did you get it on Steam after it came to Steam?
No, I got it on Steam.
When was it you hopped in? Okay.
So
yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so I knew about Hades since it was announced, as I think you did, because it was a Game Awards announcement, right?
It was a big announcement, yeah. They were like, it was kind of a, it was actually the day that I made my Epic Store account, because Donald Mustard was on stage with Keeley being like, we're going to give you Shadow Complex for free if you make an account. I was like, well, I want to play Shadow Complex, I'll make an Epic account. So yeah, the first game on my Epic account was the free copy of Shadow Complex. But yeah, I believe because they were announcing the store, the Epic Game Store, at the same time, Hades was like a launch title for the Epic Game Store, which was the idea behind it.
Right,
so.
and that's when it started early access, if I remember. Right? Yeah.
Correct. Yes. Yeah. But it was just on Epic for like the first year, right? I think it was exclusivity of a year.
About a year. I think it was about a year. Yeah. So I knew about the game then. I've played Bastion. I haven't played Pyre or what's the other one? Transistor. I have not played Pyre or Transistor. Yeah. I should go back to Bastion at some point because I don't think I ever finished it back in the day. But I've been aware of Supergiant.
Yeah, my intention was before Hades 2 came out was to go back and play through their entire catalog, and I started Bastion again, and I still am like halfway through it. So I've definitely failed in that task. But I do want to go back through all their catalog again before they release it in 1.0. But yeah.
Yeah, I would like to as well. But, aware of Supergiant, Hades, I'm like, oh, this looks pretty cool. I didn't think too much of it after that. It had slowly been, going away in early access, adding more and more and more stuff. And I think it had just released on Steam, and I think Northern Lion started playing it. And I'm a big Northern Lion fan. He's the best. We talk about him like personally, but big Northern Lion fan, and he played this game, and I'm like, what the heck is this? This looks like outstanding. This looks incredible. The art design is gorgeous. The combat seems amazing, and I picked it up on Steam. I think it was probably about 4, maybe 5 months before the game came out into 1.0. So it was already like pretty feature complete at that point. And I was just astounded by like how good the writing was, how good the voice acting was, how beautiful the visuals, character, art design was, how just incredible and like quick-paced and chunky the combat feels in that game. And I was in love. And at this point, we were talking about this before the show started, but at this point, like, I think a lot of people were aware of Hades because of that Game Awards announcement, but people hadn't really checked it out in early access, at least not to the degree that they eventually would.
It's kind of like the Baldur's Gate 3 thing, right?
Yeah, exactly. It is just like that.
Where like that game came out and was bubbling under the surface and people were playing it, but like it wasn't until the 1.0 where it had its moment in the sun, basically.
Yes. It was exactly like that. But during those, 4 or 5 months when I was playing this, I was like, I feel like I'm living under a rock. I mean, this is the best thing I've played in years, and people are not talking about this. But then I felt very vindicated when 1.0 came out, and incredibly happy for the guys at Supergiant. They seem like, I mean, not only, world-class, outstanding developers, but just from what I've heard about how the company operates, like with its staff and employees, they seem... they got it right. They know what they're doing over there. But I just felt so vindicated. People finally, they saw this game. It was getting a ton of awards and attention and everything, and I'm thrilled because Hades 1 is still an outstanding game. I mean, we're still early. We're in 2024, but if we're counting that as a 2020 game, that would still be in the running in my top 10 at least of like favorite games of the decade currently. I adore
Hades 1. Yeah, so Hades 1 is in my top 5 games of all time. Like, it is just...
It's that high now?
It's that high.
Wow,
like,
yeah.
I absolutely fucking adore that game, and I think it's just an achievement in every aspect of video games, right? Like, every single thing, like, from the incredible soundtrack to the astonishing art design to just the snappiness and just the flexibility of combat and just the variety and how far you can push it and all the ways in which you use the heat system to just keep ramping things up. Like, it's an endless game.
Heat system is brilliant. Like, one of the best difficulty, maybe the best difficulty system I've ever seen in a game.
Yeah,
Heat
incredible.
system's incredible.
And so, yeah, for my journey with Hades, it was basically you messaging me being like, hey, this game's good. You should check it out. You should pick it up. And I'm like, I don't do early access.
Did I introduce you to Hades too? Did I?
Yeah. Basically, okay, so for the background for listeners, if there's any roguelike that exists out there that Devon's like, oh, this is cool, he like badgers me and it's like, dude, you got to play this. You got to fucking play this game.
Yeah, that's
and I think,
true.
I think earlier on, a few years ago, like I was like, yeah, I'm not that into roguelikes. I don't listen as much. Now, if he recommends me a roguelike, I'm like, okay, I'm gonna pay attention because I really like the genre, and you have very good recommendations. And so I think you're just telling me like, oh, this game's so good, you got to play it when it comes out. And I was interested because I was following the development through. So I'm a big fan of Danny O'Dwyer, who runs NoClip, the video game documentary stuff, and he did a kind of a live documentary.
Yeah, that was awesome.
Hades.
That was so good.
Yeah, as early access was being developed, he was doing a documentary with those guys, and so I just loved watching those videos, and so I was just kind of following along the development journey, just watching those videos. And so, all the kind of praise and stuff was coming about, and so it came out on Switch, and I started playing it, and I think it took like a little bit of time to kind of get into the swing of things, but very quickly I started to realize, oh god, this thing's like really, really good.
Yeah.
Like it just dug its claws into me, and to this day, so I have beaten Hades 49 times, and I have done 99 runs, and so I have never gone back to it because I'm terrified, because the next run it would be 50 wins to 100 runs, so I'd have a perfect 50% win rate, and if I fuck up that run, I just don't want to do it. I just don't want to ruin it. So I think I'm eternally going to be stuck on 49 wins and 100 runs, and obviously that's quite a lot, because to beat Hades, to quote unquote beat it, you have to beat it 10 times, right? But then I'm like, I've got to get all the fucking relationship points with everybody, and I've got to see all the rest of the story. And so, like, just kept playing it again and again. It was a ritual for me after work every day. I would just play a run of Hades, and that was how I racked up 90, 100 hours in that game. Was, I think I quote unquote beat it by like 40 hours, 50 hours, but the 50 hours after that was just like, well, I'm just gonna keep playing this for fun, just because I like playing it so much. So yeah, it definitely was very easily my game of the year that year. And
me too, no question.
Has now a place like in my favorite games of all time. So context there, we're people who fucking love Hades and think it's one of the best games ever made. So
I do want to say though, because as you were saying, like I think until Hades and Slay the Spire and maybe some of the other games I had recommended you over the years, you were not like super experienced with roguelites. And
no,
I think a lot of people are scared of roguelites just because they hear, oh, if I die, I got to start all over, all this stuff.
Right.
It is understandable to me that someone who is not familiar with the genre would be a little bit hesitant to get into it. I think if there's any game out there to introduce you to the genre in the best way possible, Hades is the game, because you've got so many other layers with the story, the relationship building, just the incredible visuals, all that stuff to keep you going if you're not so sure about having to start from square one at the beginning, which you don't in Hades. There's lots of meta progression and stuff, but there's a lot more
definitely
there,
true,
which other games don't have.
Yeah, it's definitely the gateway drug. I think the one drawback is that you start at the top of the mountain. There's no going up from here, basically. Like, everything else is not, like, worse than Hades, but, like, I think Hades is just such a perfect experience. And I think, especially for people who aren't great at those games, it has stuff like the God mode, which is excellent. But I think the other thing is, because the narrative moves forward regardless of whether you win or not, like, you're always rewarded for coming back when you die.
Yeah.
Exactly, like, there's the purpose of it is you want to die so that you get interesting dialogue options when you return, from your run. So I think it's just the perfect storm in a lot of ways for a lot of people. And I think I did get a lot of people into the genre.
I think so,
which is great because it's become such a healthy genre over the last few years, and I think at this point it probably is in my top 3. If we're talking about like my favorite genres, it's Metroidvanias, it's probably RPGs, and it's roguelikes. I know putting roguelike as a genre is a weird thing, because at this point it's like it's a mode of play that you can apply to like almost any genre. But it's, I think, like the kind of action
example for that.
Right. Yeah. There's the kind of action kind of strain of roguelikes has definitely been something I've fallen in love with over the last few years. From Dead Cells to Hades to a bunch of other Rogue Legacy 2 I really loved. Like there's lots of great ones out there. So and I think Windblown is the next one from Motion Twin, the Dead Cells folks. One. Yeah, I think that was announced at Game Awards last year, I want to say, which looks very cool. But yeah, I guess all that context coming into the game we're here to talk about. 45 minutes into this podcast about Hades 2.
We do like Hades 1.
So we're going to talk about Hades 2. And I think we're going to do non-spoilers and then spoilers. So we'll just talk generally, I think, about the game. And then we can demark where spoilers will start. And if you're a Nintendo person, you're going to wait until this is on Switch 2 inevitably next year. And that's when you're going to play it. You can just come back to this podcast then, and you can listen to it once you've gotten to that point. But let's just do general feelings, general thoughts. How are you feeling, Devon, living in this world where we get to play Hades 2? Well, I had no idea this was going to happen. They were like, oh, there's a technical test. And I was like, oh, that's cool. That'll probably happen later in the year. And then like a day later, they're like, oh, the technical test is open. Yeah. I was like, what the fuck? And then they were like, oh yeah, early access is going to launch like 2 weeks after the technical test. I was like,
and then it was like 1 week.
This is
yeah,
it was mad. So yeah, I certainly did. I feel bad for the Hollow Knight sickos out there, of which I am kind of one. But they've been waiting for so long, and here we are, we're just eating good with Hades 2. So yeah, how you feeling?
So when Hades 1 released, and I had a lot of time with the game, I think a little bit more on average, obviously, than people who were just picking it up from 1.0. I was like, if there is any game to get some kind of DLC, like add a few extra gods, maybe 1 or 2 different weapons along with aspects, Hades 1 would be so good with like an expansion. And I was waiting and waiting and waiting. I'm like, I guess they're just doing this. I mean, it's already pretty. I mean, it's absolutely a feature complete game. But I just liked it so much, I wanted more. But I was like, I guess it's not happening. And then what was it? 2 years ago? 1 year ago?
I think
we got the announcement.
Yeah, I think it was the Game Awards before the last one. So it was Game Awards 2022.
It's about a year and a half ago, I suppose.
I remember sitting on the toilet the morning after because I wasn't going to stay up late to watch it, and so I was sitting on the toilet just basically watching it 1.5 times speed of the Game Awards, and like I'm watching this trailer on my phone, and I'm like, this seems like okay, interesting. And then the fucking music sting hits in that trailer, and I lost my fucking mind. I think that is the most excited I've been for a game or for a reveal in a long time. Was
up there
that
for
Hades
me.
2 trailer. It's one of the best trailers in a long time, and
yes.
I watched it again and again, and to the point where I knew all the dialogue cues when I first started the game. I was like, oh, that's the line they used in the trailer, which was very fun. But yeah, that was when it was announced. So I think over a year and a half at this point, I would say.
Yeah, about that. But I saw that announcement. I'm like, oh, these bastards. They know what they're doing. This is why there's no expansion. And I don't know if you remember because you were in Japan when this came out, so I had gotten some time to put a few more hours than you did at first. I don't know if you remember, I told you, I was like, when they're calling it Hades 2, it is very explicitly Hades 2. Double the well, we'll wait for that, but it is a sequel by all means, all defined means, and
absolutely.
I've got some issues. That I don't have in Hades 1, and I'm really hoping, and from what we've seen from their intentions and patch notes so far, I think this is stuff that's going to be ironed out a little bit by the time the game is fully released next year. But as a product that's in early access, without spoiling specifics, has at the bare minimum as much content as Hades 1, debatably. Not even debatably, it has more content than Hades 1.
Yeah.
Day 1 in early access, which is like an insane feat.
It's baffling.
I mean, it's completely baffling, and it does not feel like Hades 2 in the sense that it's like, you wanted more Hades, here you go, here's more Hades. It is like it's a new game. It feels like a completely separate but joint companion piece to Hades 1, which is more than I could have asked for. As I said, there's some things that need to be ironed out, which we'll get into, but this is an incredible game, and I could not ask for a better launch date for the early access. That's where I'm at.
Yeah, I am also absolutely in love with this game. I think that, like you said, because I played the final finished polished version of the original game, there's different expectations going into this, because as an early access, you know that the reason they want to do this is to get feedback from the community, to just iron out the kinks and just figure out what they need to change and adapt and balancing and all that sort of stuff, which certainly I think is important. And there's parts of the game where I'm like, that just felt, or like enemies feel like they maybe have too much health, or this move feels like it is a hitbox is too bad and stuff like that, which is stuff I never experienced in the first game because it was a final product. But for a product that is in early access, I think it's one of the most polished things that you can get, regardless of actual games or early access games. And the depth of it, the variety, the way in which it is building on the original, like you said, it's just remarkable.
But
and
different still. Yeah.
Different as well, yeah, and I think meaningfully different and like interestingly different, which is really, really good. And so I was lucky to get into the technical test, so I was able to play it slightly early, and so I played like probably 4 hours of just that first area, fighting the first boss again and again.
Just I think it was just the staff and the daggers, right? Those were the only two
Yes,
weapons you could
correct.
use.
Yeah, just that and just the first area and first boss. And then I beat it 5 times and I got locked out, and I was like, oh, I'm stupid. I should have just kept dying so I could keep playing it. But it actually worked out because like I then jumped in. I didn't kind of burn myself out on that stuff, and then jumped in when I woke up that morning in Japan, and the first thing I saw was your message about it. I was like, well, this is just divine providence. Like, the guy who got me into Hades is the first one I hear from about early access. Then I went to Twitter and I was like, right, it's out now. I'm so glad I brought my Steam Deck with me.
You hadn't heard about it before I messaged you? I didn't realize that.
No, that was the first thing I saw was your message about it. I was like, oh shit, here we go. So yeah, I then downloaded it, and then I played I think 10 hours on the plane back from Japan, which was. But I think I started playing it and I was like, oh, that felt like I played like a good hour and a half of Hades 2. And I look at the clock, I'm like, oh shit, I've burned 5 hours of this flight. I didn't realize. So yeah, if you want a time travel game, it certainly is one of those as well.
Well, that's for sure.
Yes. But I guess to set up what like Hades 2 is it is a direct sequel, right?
It is, yeah.
And we are playing as Melinoe or Melinoe. I think Melinoe is the Greek actual pronunciation, but a lot of characters in the game say Melinoe.
Yeah.
And she is Zagreus' sister. And you find out some stuff early on. I wouldn't really consider it spoilers, which is nobody's here. She's just kind of been abandoned as a child, and so she is kind of trying to figure out what's gone on. And the evil god, he's not a god, he's a titan, in fact. The Titan Kronos, who is canonically the father of Poseidon, Zeus, and Hades, I believe.
Yes.
Is basically like taken over the underworld and has done stuff with the family you don't know about, and so your goal is to kill time, essentially.
Right.
Go and murder the concept of time itself, which I think is really interesting because when you think about it, Hades, the original, is really a family drama, and the stakes are not. Like, the stakes are high to some degree, but they're not massively high because it's really you rebelling against your father.
Yeah, exactly.
It's a personal vendetta. It's you trying to break away. You're a rebellious teenager. You're trying to get out. Your dad is trying to stop you. And there's secrets beyond the underworld for you to figure out. Whereas the stakes feel way higher because this is a life or death situation, right? Like, it's not just you're trying to be a rebellious teen. You are trying to save your entire family, and there is a very real, dangerous threat that you are going after, which I think just changes the feel of it and the vibe a little bit, which I think is quite interesting.
Absolutely, and it's also, there's we don't need to spoil, like, I guess, too many specifics from Hades 1, but the basic concept of that game, apart from Zagreus, I suppose, I think he is like a very minor god that's mentioned in certain things within Greek text and mythology, but he's not like a primary god like someone like Hades is. But the general story between Hades and Persephone is like a relatively well-known, I would say, or common Greek myth. So that was context that I had going into it that informs the story. Certain beats that are going to happen, which is not a complaint. I mean, it's well done, but there's a little bit more like, this is what I was expecting was going to happen, but it's cool to see that. Whereas this is a completely original, at least to my understanding and knowledge, this is a completely original story that Supergiant is telling. So not only are the stakes much higher and grander, it's like, we don't really know what's going to happen or who a lot of these characters are. Yeah.
Totally. And I think like it's really interesting because there's a way in which they're playing with not just gods and like legends of Greek myth, but characters from those stories who weren't gods, who are still. They did that a little bit as well in the original game, but like Odysseus is a main character.
Yeah, but there's more of it in this one, I think so.
It's a lot more, yeah. Odysseus is a main character here who's part of your kind of hub area.
He's great. What a hottie.
He's great. I love Odysseus, cool guy. I like that she calls him Odd. Like, that's very fun. And you also have like these other like lesser known characters, I guess, or like elements of like the fates being talked about. And Nyx, it seems like Nyx has like 200 children. Everyone's
Apparently.
like, oh yeah, my Nyx is my mom. Like, that seems like a consistent thing. Nyx being the character from the first game who is night incarnate essentially, and so Nyx is again, at the end of the day, like, it is like a big family, essentially. The Greek pantheon of gods and of everyone surrounding them is one giant family, and that's what that kind of drama comes from in the original. But I do think it's interesting. We have Hecate in this game. Hecate is your mentor. She's a witch, and she is essentially a foster mother to Melanoe, and I think she's a very interesting character, and her motivations for what she's doing and how she kind of ties into things, because she feels a little separate in that way, because she isn't family necessarily, but she is the person who is essentially the mother figure, or has been for most of her life. And I think that I just want to see where that goes and like what they do with it, because I think there's a lot of really interesting character relations already set up, and yeah, I'm just very curious about how it all gets paid off, basically. But it does already feel like there's a lot more characters to interact with and people coming in and out of your base, but also when you go out on a run, more people to find as well.
Yeah, a lot more.
So
yeah.
I guess let's talk about the kind of meat of it, the combat of the game, because it is distinctly different. And I think if you are someone who's played hundreds of hours of Hades 1, you will have to relearn some stuff, and you will have to kind of
there's a learning curve, definitely.
Definitely. Get your muscle memory into a different place, because there's a few different changes. Part of it is that you have this Arcana card system that is kind of tangential to that. It's like the mirror equivalent from the first game. But this one, you can activate and deactivate cards based on another currency called your grasp. And the amount of grasp points you have indicates how many cards you can have active at once. And these cards can do anything from recharge your mana to give you death defiances to giving you more health when you enter a room. And they have points associated. So the more grasp you have, the more you're able to add in terms of your Arcana. But all this is built around the kind of the new system, which is you are a witch, and so you can do magic. And these magic moves are called Omega moves, and they use up a mana bar that you then have to get back somehow, either through the recharging Arcana cards or through a boon or through some other means, basically.
Yep.
So yeah, this is a pretty fundamental system to this game, right? Having your regular moves, but then you now have these special abilities that you can pull off for a cost. How are you finding it so far?
Yeah, it absolutely was a learning curve, because the way I initially played the game, which I think I would be shocked if I was in the minority here. I would think a lot of people who played Hades 1 did this as well, where I started it, you start with the staff, which is, the most basic weapon. It makes sense that they picked that one to be the starter weapon. And you play a few runs, and you're like, oh, this Omega system is kind of cool. Like, you want to do a big attack or finish off enemies. Like, that's an option that's there for you. And then I hit a wall and started to struggle with the game more. And I'm like, why is this feeling a lot harder? Which is something we'll get into. I think this game is explicitly more difficult than Hades 1.
Yes,
in the
at least from the
moment,
beginning.
At least from the beginning. But you realize it's like, oh, I should be using these moves a lot more. And then you realize,
I should be using them all the time, in fact.
All the time. And oh my god, this is not just like, hey, a cool little thing if you want to do like a fun super attack. This is another layer that you can use. You can do an Omega special build. You can do an Omega cast build. You can do an Omega attack build. And those are generally pretty strong. There's a lot of god boons from the different gods in the games that explicitly alter your Omega moves, and those tend to be really special. And as you said, you've got this magic system where I think, there's an Arcana card that I think it's like you get like 1 or 2 magic every second, if I remember.
You regen it, which I think that's actually a really crucial thing in changing my understanding of the system. And I do wonder if they are going to tutorialize it slightly differently when the full release happens, because my worry is that people see it and they're like, oh, I shouldn't really use this. And then they get, like you said, slaps across the face, and like, how am I not doing better? And if you had some idea of like the best way and how important it is to recharge magic early on, I think that would help people's learning curve, because I think without that recharge arcana, like, you need to get a boon, or you have to have something that recharges your arcana, otherwise, or your mana, otherwise you just can't use those moves at all, which makes things very difficult.
Well, I was gonna say, I found in my, so I've got about, let me check on Steam, I've got about, I think, like 22-ish hours in the game.
Okay.
I've currently found like one of the most important pieces to your run a lot of the times, because now that I have more time in the game, you are using those magic moves a lot. One of the most important pieces to your run is, I believe every single god has a version of a mana regen, recharge, like alteration boon. Some of them, as is going to be the case in a game like this, I think are stronger than others, but getting one of those mana altering boons is really, really important. Like Aphrodite's, for example, it'll always make one enemy weak, and if you stand within a certain radius, your magic regens really quickly. I think is it Zeus? Zeus has got the one that it's like your overall mana bar is, I think, 70% lower, but it recharges super quickly. So getting those boons are really important.
Yeah, I think the most powerful one is the one where you stand in your cast and it just auto regens you. I can't remember whose that is, but that's maybe, the Omega cast I know for Apollo is the one where it just like does damage on the ground constantly, which is a fun one.
That one's awesome.
Especially
that
for like
cool.
the very first like minor boss you come across. They showed in the trailer of like the plant lady who shoots the spikes at you that teaches you about the sprint mechanic. That one, like when I had that boon, I was like, well, that fight is over instantly, basically. But yeah, I think the other thing is keepsakes, right? So keepsakes return, which are the items that you get when you give what's it? It's not called ambrosia. Ambrosia is the like higher upgraded nectar. When you give nectar to a character, you get a keepsake, and those keepsakes do different things. And one of the early ones you can get is one that regens 1,000 mana for the whole period of your run, basically. And so you can take that
one. You like it?
I've used it a little bit, yeah. So I actually used it initially because I didn't have access to the Arcana card that regened mana yet. So the only when I was first starting, I was like, how the fuck do I regen mana? So I was using that keepsake a lot early on, and then once I got the Arcana card, I started using it a bit less. But if you do upgrade that one, the second stage of it is 1,500 per night, and then I think it probably goes to 2,000 per night, which is quite a lot actually in terms of mana usage. Especially if you're pairing it with the Arcana card, then its usage is actually a little less because it's being combined with that. And so when you're regaining, half of it is being done by the Arcana card, half of it is being done by the keepsake, and so you can keep that one going for quite a long time, and it means your recharge rate is really quick. Like, you just instantly go back up to full, essentially. Which there's synergies and ways of playing around that. Like, one of the cards that you can have active is one that increases your damage output when you don't have full mana. So your whole purpose is to get rid of your mana bar so that you can focus on doing a lot more damage without having it active, which is very interesting. I'm sure there's going to be a lot more of that stuff as they add new things to the game and synergies and things like that. But yeah, it is a cool system, and I have found that like every weapon you unlock, there's that new level of like not just the basic attacks, but like, okay, what's the Omega move for this, and what does it do, and how does it change things up?
Some of them are awesome.
Like you said, some of them are really wild, and I think that it's just a fun exercise to just play around with those and be like, okay, so this run I'm going to do the axe, and it's just going to be the Omega move for that. I'm just going to spin and win, essentially.
The spin axe builds are so much fun. Oh, they're so good.
Yes. Yeah, I got to the end of a run with it, and it wasn't powerful enough for me to win, but it was burning through everything up until that point. So yeah, that stuff is really good. And yeah, I guess the other major change is the movement with less dashes and
that was
sprint
a
ability. So
big learning curve for me. That was the biggest, I think, because the sprint, and they've said explicitly they are going to adjust it to try to make it a little bit more fluid. So
they've already patched it, right, to make it faster at this point, which is nice.
I think so.
There's going to be,
I think they have.
Yeah. I think there's going to be further tweaks to it. I think like so much of Hades 1 was like dash, 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 right? Just like using that quick recharge to reposition yourself and to get in a better spot. And I think this game is a lot more about crowd control and just managing lots of enemies and creating choke points, interestingly enough, which I found super fascinating, where I remember the cast in Hades 1, and I never really got too in love with the cast. Like, the cast was an interesting thing of, like, okay, I guess I can use this thing for, like, some stuff. Like, the Dionysus one where you threw it and it created a cloud of, like, death was fun.
Shot,
there are a few of those that were good. But I don't know, I never liked, like, the way that it looked with the diamond and stuff like that. The cast was always a secondary thing for me that I never thought about as much. The cast in Hades 2 is so fundamental, and, like, I use it all the time, even when I'm not building around it, because the difference is that it basically creates a summoning circle around Milinoe, and you have to drop it with enemies coming into it. If an enemy is inside it, they'll just get trapped essentially, or severely slowed down. And if they're coming towards you, which they teach you very early on with one of the enemies who's the fucking screaming witches who just come towards you. I fucking hate them, especially the effect that comes on screen when, like, you get hit by it. It's just like, it feels really bad. You feel like you're taking way more damage than you actually are. It just feels like terrible. But the way to control those guys is to drop a circle, and then they just get stuck at the edge, and you can easily take them out from a distance, which is really nice. And so early on in the game, you're learning, like, you have to drop this cast to just make sure that, you know, you can take out this group of enemies while this group of enemies are being held in a corner, and they don't kind of, like, overwhelm you essentially. And it works really well, I think. I like the cast a lot, and I like building around it. I like that the Omega move does additional damage after it explodes. Basically, after it vanishes, it does damage to enemies standing inside it. And there's lots of different boons that affect the cast. Like I said, the one that regens your mana, there's also damaging ones with the cast. There's one that I had, which was expands the size of it slowly. That was the run where I had the Apollo boon, where it just went massive damage after it ends, and so it was doing massive damage and slowly expanding as it went. So that was pretty crazy. So I think the cast is a really cool element. And you're right, the sprint does take time to get used to, right? Like, it's a very different approach, and I like it, actually. I do like the sprint, and, like, the sprint has its own unique boons where the Zeus one, where you get, like, lightning bolts surrounding you as you run around people.
Poseidon
like, I had a
really
run where it was
too.
That as well, Poseidon, where you're just pushing people everywhere. And so like, that idea of, like, having a run where you are killing things by running past them is so novel. Like, there's almost a Vampire Survivors adjacency to it, whereas, like,
oh, interesting.
I mean, I bet Supergiant played Vampire Survivors, but, like, the idea of this sprint where you're just, like, doing damage by running past things, I think is really interesting as, like, a design thing for this game.
I think they may have gotten inspiration from Hades 1 from that, because I don't know if you ever did this build, but one of the actually, like, stronger builds in the game in Hades 1 was you get Poseidon on your dash, which does this big, like, tidal wave splash around you, and the Zeus duo boon, which makes it so whenever you use a Poseidon move, it'll do the Zeus chain lightning effect. So you could win runs in Hades 1 just by dashing around the screen like that, and it would just be total chaos. And it to me, it feels like they took inspiration from that and were like, let's expand upon this idea because it's very cool. Yeah, the sprint is interesting because, so for further context, in Hades 1, once you do one of the very early mirror upgrades, you have a default of 2 dashes, which there are invincibility frames on, obviously. So getting out of the way of attacks is a lot simpler in Hades 1. In this game, you still have a dash, which has iframes on it, but it is a dash. I have not seen a boon or anything like that, any kind of altercation which allows you to have more than one dash. I would be surprised if they include that at this point, because it seems like it's really built around the one dash into sprint mechanic.
Yeah, it goes against the fundamental sprint design, right?
Yeah.
Which I think, like, when you dash the first time, I was like, oh, that's cool. There's, like, a trail behind her that kind of zaps back into her as a visual indicator of how long it takes to cool down. And it feels like the cooldown is just significantly longer than it is in the first game.
I think so.
So they do intend you to just use the dash to get out of dodge once and then sprint away, essentially, is the idea.
It's really what I like about it too, as I'm getting more used to it, because at first, I'm going to be honest, I was not sold on it. I really like how so Hades 2 still has that same snap as Hades 1, but Hades 1 is insanely snappy, where you're just boom, 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 boom. You're almost like a pinball machine, like going around the entire screen. Whereas in Hades 2, it's a lot more methodical. And I think not only does it work as an interesting gameplay modification, it also works character-wise for Wave, right? Because you've got the way I've been thinking about it, and it makes sense from like the character design and writing perspective. You've got Zagreus in the first game, who's your sort of like, if you're thinking in an RPG, D&D, any kind of RPG really, you've got Zagreus as your sort of like bruiser, fighter, brawler kind of character, like very quick melee combat. Whereas Wade, that's not who she is. That's not what she was trained as. She's a witch. She's more of your kind of glass cannon mage type character, where your mobility is not as good, and you're playing a little bit more from range. You're focusing on AoE, as you said, but you get these big bursts of damage, and I don't know, it's fascinating to me, because I expected Hades 2 to be...
It's such an interesting, like, narrative design being built into the gameplay, which I think is a real strength of Supergiant, but, like, they are really flexing, I think, with this, having that idea there. Because, yeah, you're right. Like, when you think about the way that she plays, it is a game of keep away a lot of the time. It is, like, a bit more preparation of, like, as if she's casting... I mean, she is casting spells, right? And you have the slowdown Arcana card that lets you slow down time as you are preparing those Omega moves.
That one's key. That one's so critical.
It's really helpful, yeah. But it's really smartly building her backstory and her narrative design into the way you play her as a character, which I think is incredible.
What am I trying to say? This may seem self-explanatory, but I think when you play the game for the first time, it clicks into place more. So Melinoe and Hades 2 as a whole, this does not feel like, Hades plus a bunch of other stuff, as in like a DLC or expansion pack, as we were talking about earlier on in this segment. She feels like, almost as if in Hades 1, instead of it just being, okay, here's 4 more gods, 6 more or I guess 5 currently, 5 more weapons, all this other nonsense. It feels as if they added a completely different selectable, playable character, almost as if in, I don't know, Diablo, you're going from warrior, paladin, or something in Zagreus to sorcerer or wizard. I don't know Diablo. I don't know the Diablo classes, but
just say D&D.
Sure. Yeah, D&D. It's a completely different character in class, and it's cool. I'm still learning it, and I'm still adjusting to it, but I don't know, maybe I'm dumb for not assuming it would be this way. I kind of thought it was just going to be Zagreus, but different weapons and different gods, but it's totally different.
It's a fundamental, gameplay design change, and I really like it. Like, I think there's a smoothness to both of these games, which I think just inherently they are just so playable and tangible, and they just feel fucking great. But this one, I think, distinguishes itself with the way that it feels. And like, learning to play this has been really enjoyable. And like, the things that you do, it just feels a bit more methodical, I will say. And because you have a lot more to think about, it necessitates you having those moments of like, okay, I'm going to drop down the circle so that I can think, okay, is it smart now to like get my mana recharge and then like hold down the button to do my Omega move, and I want to do backstab damage on this guy because I've upgraded my weapon to do that. Like, I think there's a deliberateness to it, which I think is really, really cool.
I like that because
there's definitely moments in the first game, right, where by the end anyway, while I was super powerful, I was like spamming shit as Zag, and like I was just getting through very easily. And you really can't do that here, I don't think. So
no, at least not with how far I think both of us are in the meta progression and everything. I don't. Yeah, exactly. I don't think you can.
Yeah, I guess speaking of that, how are you feeling about all these additional meta progression elements? So we have like Ash, which is used to buy Arcana cards, and then you have Grasp, which is used to activate them. You also have a bunch of resources. Hey, it's Stardew Valley, guys. There's resource collecting, which is a cool element where you can take a a tool out with you, which they have just updated in the patch, by the way. So you don't have to have the exact tool for everything now. You get bonus stuff based on what tool you have.
Oh, thank
but
God.
you can collect everything a bit more easier now, so it doesn't feel as grindy. But yeah, you can collect flowers, you can collect rocks with a mining pick, you can get additional grass with one of the items, and you can also dig up things with a shovel to get seeds that you then plant in like a garden that you essentially have.
And fish.
And then
Don't forget about fishing.
Sorry, fishing as well, of course.
Of course.
But then you can also there's the Witch's Cauldron, which I think is really cool, where you have recipes, and those recipes will either add things to the hub area or add things or like recognizable things into the main runs of the game. So like the Charon's well, I think it is, right? The purple
Yeah, the little like mini shop.
Water. Yeah, the mini shop, essentially. You don't have that from the beginning, and I think I remember, like, oh, right, there's a lot of things that you assume that's going to be there, but it's like, no, in the first game as well, you did have to, like, buy these things so that they would become available within a run.
With gems. Usually with the gems, yeah.
Yes, with the gems. And so, yeah, there's a little bit more of a learning curve, again, of being like, oh, right, yes, this is the start of this game, and so we're going to have to use the meta progression in order to unlock this stuff. But yeah, the Witch's Cauldron I think is really cool as a way to do that. And you also have the list of minor prophecies, which is again similar to the first game. But I think there's a lot of really nice little bits everywhere to where no matter what you're doing, you're always progressing towards something. And so even if it's a run where you fail, again, you're going to get more narrative, but again, you're going to be able to get some fish or get some other resource that you can then pump into either a weapon or into an arcana or into something, and eventually just slowly gain power and meta stuff over time. How are you finding kind of the juggling of all those systems and things so far?
So I have not played since they changed it that you could have more than one of those tools to go into certain areas, because that I think was thank God they changed that, because I really do like the resource collecting stuff, and not only is it fun. I mean, we all play video games. It's fun to have a certain goal that you feel like you're continuously working towards. That's an enjoyable aspect of games. However, I don't play a game like Hades like it's Minecraft or something like that. Like I play because I like the story and the combat and stuff. The resource collecting is kind of a bonus on top of that. I really did think it was.
You don't want it to feel too grindy, right? Like that's the thing.
No, and it kind of did feel like that. At least to me, where you could only take like the pick, for example. Well, that was the biggest issue. Whereas all of the upgrades, at least currently in the game that I've seen, so there are 4 tools right now. There's the grasp one, there's the pick, there's the shovel, and there's the fishing rod. And the grasp is super useful because it upgrades your how many Arcana cards you can use. But I never, when I was playing, I was using either the shovel or the pickaxe. I don't know about you, because those were the only 2 that actually go towards the meta progression, like either unlocking fountains or the little mini shops like you were talking about, or different weapon aspects and stuff.
Exactly, because they're specific resources as opposed to grass, which is a universal resource, or fish, which are, it doesn't matter what fish you buy, you basically just sell them for bones to the big ghost guy, essentially. So those specific, and each region of the world has a different seed you can dig or a different rock you can pick. And so those in particular were ones where it's like, oh, I took the shovel and I got to biome 3 for the first time. I'm not going to get any of the rock stuff here my first time in biome 3 because it's just
that was an issue.
only have the shovel. So I appreciate they changed that, and I think it's a good thing to do.
Me too, because I do like the different resources, and especially having them unique to the different biomes and things. I think that's really cool. And as you said, it's like, say you've progressed a little bit more through the game, and maybe you died on biome 2 or something like that. It's like, okay, it's okay. I still got some silver from the first area and some, what is it in the second area? Limestone, I think. That was a cool aspect, but it became a little bit too much in like a resource gathering game, like where that felt like your primary goal. So having that changed is that's a big deal. That's really good. But now that that's changed, I still got to play it, but I do actually really like the system, because you got to a certain point in Hades 1, right, where you had done a bunch of I don't remember what the equivalent to the cauldron was, but there was an equivalent in that game where you'd use those those colored gems to do certain
It
unlocks.
was for decorating the hub, really, right? At the end of the game, it was really like,
Well, no, but there was other stuff. No, there was other stuff in there because like there
hmm,
were certain like I think the fountains, for example, that was something that you did unlock through that system. There were also
right,
diamonds, which you'd get from the second
yes.
boss, I think,
So
in
diamonds
Hades
were the
1.
thing that you used to decorate the hub, right?
The more like impactful decorations, I think. Like if you were changing,
Yes.
I don't remember. It's been a while. If you were changing, like I remember you could change the painting style and like the lighting, chandeliers and
Right.
stuff. I think that might have been things that you upgraded through the diamonds. Regardless, you got to a certain point in Hades 1 where you'd get a reward of diamonds, or not diamonds, of the gems, and you'd be like, this is completely useless to me. I don't even have
Right.
anything that I care about upgrading with the gems. So eliminating that and making it a bunch of different resources spread throughout the world, I think is a smart change, and especially now
Mm-hmm.
that you can get everything on a particular run, because it really did suck going in, and like you said, maybe you reach biome 3 for the first time, and you have the shovel, and you can't get the ore in that area, and it's like,
Yeah.
what the hell? I was gonna unlock my next weapon or something like that,
Right.
with this resource. So
Mm-hmm.
that's a really good change.
Yeah. So yeah, I think that stuff has been really cool to mess around with, and I think it also, having something unique to do every time you come back. Like almost every run, I feel like I come back and I'm like, oh, I can do something in the cauldron, at least for the
Yeah.
first 20 hours or so. That's definitely the case, which I think is very cool, and I'm sure when the full game is done, that will continue as you go through. Obviously, you hit a kind of stopping point at some point with early access at the moment, but
I think we've
yeah,
both
there's
hit
there's
that for
still
the
quite
most
a few
part.
things. Yeah, we're getting
Yeah.
there. I think I'm 25 hours in, and I think if you add up my technical test playtime, I'm probably 30 because I think I
Mhm.
put 5 hours into the tech test. So yeah, it's a good amount of time. There's still a lot to do though.
I
There's
know.
still a lot of stuff, and there's still new stuff I'm constantly coming across, which I think is really interesting.
Do you have all the keepsakes? I'm missing a few, I think.
I have a couple that I don't have, but
Yeah.
I know where to get them from, basically. Yeah, I guess, like, if we want maybe talk about, like, the synergies and the boon stuff, and then we can get into spoilers. That's probably a good thing to do, because I can't think of anything else non-spoilery, unless you have anything else non-spoilery specifically that you want to talk about.
So the one thing I want to say, I guess, to close on what we were just talking about with the resource stuff, to me, that's another really cool, just as we talked about with Malinois's gameplay combat style, how it's different from Zagreus and it feels more methodical. You're more of a mage type character in this game. The resource stuff I really like because not only is it fun as a player to feel like you've always got a goal that you're working towards, everything you're doing matters. It also makes sense from a narrative perspective, right? I mean, Malinois is a witch, so she's brewing stuff literally in a cauldron
Right.
like a witch
Yeah,
would,
exactly.
and
Uh-huh.
she'd be making things like potions or whatever. So it makes sense that you'd be collecting all of these natural resources from the wild. So I don't know. I just like that. It's super giant. They're
Yeah.
they're smart guys, smart people over there.
They're masters of this stuff. Yeah, absolutely,
They
absolutely.
are.
And it's the same with the Arcana cards and all that sort of stuff, right? It's
Yeah,
very
exactly.
much narrative tied in to the design. So
Hmm.
yeah, it's really good stuff. Sweet. Well, I guess, like, before we go into spoilers, would you recommend, like, if people have access to this, right, and they can play it on PC, would you recommend people jump into the early access version of Hades 2, or do you think people should be waiting? What's your kind of thoughts on that?
It's really difficult because as we've talked about, this is a pretty like feature rich game already, but it
Mm-hmm.
does feel unfinished and not in the way that it's like, oh no, I fell through the fucking floor again or whatever. It's more
No.
just like, oh, there's so much in here, but they're gonna add even more stuff, which is incredibly impressive. So if you're the kind of player that likes to see a game progress as it goes on, and by the way, Supergiant are like they're super responsive to community feedback. So if you feel like you have something, that you want to express that you think should be changed or added in the game, they have a whole like community suggestion channel in their Discord, which they listen to players a lot in. So if you like that aspect of a game, absolutely go and play it. The game is incredible, and there is no doubt, and I mean, from what I can tell, either of our minds, that it will continue to get better and better. So go for it. But I don't know. I mean, there is stuff that, like, without spoiling things too heavy, there are certain major biomes and areas that are not in the game yet. So if you want a complete experience, maybe wait a few months at least. I don't know. I think, to me, one of the interesting questions is, and maybe we can get into this, is so you absolutely could play this game before you play Hades 1, but should you? I don't know if you should.
Right.
I think
Yeah.
I think
Yeah,
maybe you should
exactly.
play Hades 1 first.
I think a lot of people have, of course, which is great. But yeah, I feel like at the moment it is definitely feeling like you can just jump in and just figure out things as you go. You're going to be rewarded a lot more, I think, later on for having done that, because you're going to have full context and understanding, and that's going to make things just hit a little bit harder. But I don't know. I think that they also do feel distinct and different enough from a control and combat perspective to where I don't think you are like losing anything for playing Hades 1 and then going into Hades 2.
No, definitely not.
I think they're distinct enough experiences, which could very well have not been the case. Because I think sometimes, like, everyone has been having that Breath of the Wild versus Tears of the Kingdom conversation, and
Oh yeah.
in some senses, you look at Tears of the Kingdom and you're like, I mean, like, mechanically, this is just superior to Breath of the Wild in a lot of ways, right? So, like, is it worth it to play Breath of the Wild before Tears of the Kingdom? I don't know. I feel like that's maybe cause for burnout potentially, but
Definitely.
But yeah, I think this is slightly different in that way. So I'd recommend doing that. But yeah, the other thing is, like, I'm actually super curious. Like, I've not really done this before with early access games. I just don't do them, and so this is a rarity, and so I'm just very interested to see.
Yeah, I was a little shocked because I know you don't.
Yeah.
I was wondering if you were gonna wait until 1.0 or not, but you jumped in in the deep end.
Yeah, I think it's just like, it is one of my favorite games of all time, the original, and so
Yeah,
I just
you can't wait.
I can't sit here. I can't sit here while other people are playing and enjoying this game and be
Exactly.
like, no, I will wait. I'm too weak for that. I'm way too fucking weak-minded. And so yeah, I had to. But yeah, I'm super interested to just follow how it changes. And like already that first patch, I'm like, oh, this is cool. Like, the sprint is faster, and like they've changed some stuff, and so you see it evolve as it goes, which I think is fascinating. And also, there's another fun aspect of this, which is, you come across some characters and, like, they're not fully drawn. Like, they're paint. They're like
They've got that, like, hooded sprite.
yeah. They're like they're very much like an early sketch of like what a character could look like.
There are some of those,
So
yeah.
they do have the you're right. They do have the hooded sprite as well.
The kind of default character, yeah, when they clearly
Yes.
haven't finished, the model
Exactly.
or the art, the key art, yeah.
Right. So some of them have that, but some of them just have like, this is like stage 1 of a drawing, like, you can see what the character's supposed to look like.
Yeah, MS Paint background or whatever.
Exactly, yeah, like MS Paint background, just like, here's just like a really crudely drawn sketch of what this character's vibe is going to be eventually. I find that very funny, and also, like, nice, because I know that there'll be an update where it's like, oh, the character art is in, and so there's a fun surprise of being like, oh, I know the bad drawing version of them. Now I can see what they were supposed to look like, what they're actually supposed to look like, which I think is super fun. So yeah, I'm looking forward to that. But yeah, I think if you have the ability to play this and
for
you're
it.
itching to, just do it. I think just do it, and you won't regret it, because it's a really great time.
Yeah, I don't know what the the UK pounds price is, but already for 30 USD, I mean, you're getting more than your money's worth. I would say.
Yeah,
and
it's,
that's at,
it's 25, so it's a lot. It's a lot of video game there for you. But hey,
for 30 USD, you're getting a hell of a lot more than a lot of $60 or $70 games out right now. And this is early access,
definitely.
week 2 or whatever.
Yeah, exactly. It's so early in its journey, which is shocking in some ways. But yeah, if you are someone who is just a console person and you're waiting for Supergiant to be a launch title on Switch 2 with Hades 2, most likely. It's my guess anyway. My guess is it's going to be like a March
that's
next year.
interesting. I didn't think about that.
Yeah. I think they're probably talking to Nintendo.
I could see it. Because they did. Do you remember with the original Switch?
Yes.
The Shovel Knight collection. They finished, what was it? The Spectre
Oh,
Knight,
the treasure
I think.
trove,
That,
right?
the
Yeah.
treasure trove, yeah, they had one of the Shovel Knight campaigns launched with the Switch,
Hmm.
so Nintendo is not
Yes.
unfamiliar with doing things like that.
Certainly not. And Hades was pushed strongly from them in their Indie World presentations and all that sort of
Yep.
stuff. And I imagine next to PC, Switch was the best-selling version of the game. So yeah, I definitely think
Oh,
that would
for
be smart
sure.
of them to do that. So yeah. So if you are one of those people and you are waiting, jump off now and come back to this show in I don't know however many months' time, and you
Probably a
can listen
year, about a
to.
year.
Yeah, I think so, and you can hear what you will find out in a year's time is what we're going to talk about now. So
Hmm.
get on out of here, and we're going to move over to some spoiler chat of Hades 2. So yeah, Hades 2 is hiding some things. It's some you would say in plain sight.
It's true.
I was curious when I saw that.
The 2 is deliberate, as I told you.
Yes, absolutely. When I saw that door upways, I was like, yeah, you're probably like. I almost thought it was going to be like a daily run thing potentially of like, this is where they add like a bit of the extra stuff going in, where you're like, oh, okay, you're going to unlock this eventually. I almost also thought like, oh, maybe it's just another region of the Crossroads where there's more characters and more stuff to do. But I wasn't.
That's what I thought it might. Like, do you remember in Hades 1 when you'd finish the runs, you'd go up to, it was what, like Persephone's garden or something like that? I
Yes,
thought
yeah,
it
yeah,
might
yeah.
be a similar area to that.
Because I guess you are still on the surface at the start. Like the Crossroads is technically on the
Yeah.
surface, right? So yeah, there's definitely an option for that. But yeah, then you go up there and there's a second video game in this video game.
Yeah.
Ostensibly, anyway, it feels like it's basically a second run where there are 4 biomes below, and at the moment there are 2 biomes above. Is there gonna be 2 more? I don't know. Maybe
Presumably.
1 more. They
One
have
more
said
for
they're adding
sure.
at least. Yeah, they're at least adding 1 more region. So it could be a 3 biome run at the top and a 4 biome run at the bottom. But yeah, you were very excited for me to reach that point
Yeah.
because I don't think you expected.
What was your reaction?
I was like, oh wow, there's a boss here. Oh, it's Polyphemus. Oh shit, even more Odysseus reference. Feels like that's why Odysseus I think is quite important. We've got fucking Scylla and Charybdis and Polyphemus, like every Odysseus
And
adjacent
Cersei and the
enemy. Cersei, yeah,
yeah.
exactly. Like Odysseus is you can see why he's a core character here because
Yeah.
they are building a lot of characters around him who are going to be kind of integral to, I'm sure, stories as they go along, right? Like eventually Achilles and Patroclus, they were both like in that room in Elysium in Hades 1. I feel like there's going to be a lot more of that. There already is so much of that already, of like just unique bespoke events happening across this game.
There's like a unique one every biome or something. There's tons. Like, it's crazy.
Yes. So yeah, so we've got up run and we've got down run for this
Yeah.
game, which is very cool. And I have very much enjoyed just like once I unlocked it, I was like, oh, okay, because you have the whole. It's like a little bit of a process to get there, where you go up and you're like, oh, I just die instantly because there's poison, and then you have to go and collect resources so that you kind of nullify the poison effect, and I think that's one of the most interesting things to me about Hades 2 is how every single biome feels so distinct and different from a level design and structural perspective. Where Hades 1 was like pretty much just change the color palette and like the enemies
Add
and
some traps
some
and
of the
things.
like
Yeah.
some of the traps, right? Like that was the real distinction between areas. Hades 2 is like, okay, so this area is like an open world now, or like there's a real constraint to the Oceanus, like the underwater, and we have like this unseal mechanic where you can unseal an area and unlock a different path to go down, but then you have to fight more enemies to get it. And like every single one, especially the one on the surface, is like, okay, here's a town, choose the 5 or 6 doors you want to do, and that will start your run off. Like it's so cool how every single area is structured completely differently. So yeah, that struck me a lot.
Yeah, me too. So my reaction was I went into that, you unlock that door to go further on in the surface, and I'm like, oh, what? You're getting a boon here? Oh, okay, this is probably just like a little mini area that you need like a specific meta resource, and you're gonna keep coming back there and doing short runs. So when I saw Polyphemus, I was like, yeah, okay, it makes sense to lock that resource behind a boss. That's cool. Then I'm like, oh, there's a door to keep going. Well, it's probably just gonna take me back to the camp. Then I'm like, oh, there's a second area here. And it clicked in my mind. I'm like, yeah, there are two completely different games, as you said, within this this one game. That it seems like, we don't know all these details currently, but it seems like you're probably, to beat Hades 2, you may have to do, 5 underworld runs, 5 surface runs, or 10 and 10, or something like that. So it's there's a lot of game. There's a lot of game to this game.
I'm very interested how this is going to be structured, right? Because you are splitting it, and there's two things going on, right? Narratively, you have the war at Olympus that is happening, but then there's also Kronos.
And you're not supposed to be there. That's the other thing, too, right? Whereas, I guess you're not supposed to be in the underworld since it's Kronos' domain. But it's clear that your objective is go down, kill Kronos, rescue your family, where you first go onto the surface, and people are, like, mad at you. They're like, why are you doing this? This is not your objective. This is not your domain. So, I don't know. It's just cool from a narrative perspective.
Definitely, because Hecate has, like, blocked it off deliberately so that you don't, because your purpose is to go down below and to kill time, right? Not to go up and help the rest of the gods. And so I'm, like, obviously the next biome has to be Olympus, like going up the mountain adjacent, I would guess.
Probably.
And then is there another one after that? I don't know. Like it feels
like on top of Olympus. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. There's
And who would the boss be? I don't even know who the final boss of that area would be.
Right. Like there's so many questions of like what could they do? Like it's very exciting, I think, that they have opened that possibility because it completely just changes the stakes of the story, but also like there's so many more branching ways in which it can go. Like what if a person, obviously in the early access version, the only way to win, quote unquote, is to beat Kronos.
Yeah.
But what if a person, their first win is at Olympus? Like how does that change things?
I know.
What if you win up there before you do Kronos? Which I don't think is likely. I think the balancing, the surface is a lot more difficult than the underworld.
It feels like it significantly more difficult, I would say. And the underworld is already harder than it is in Hades 1.
Right. Yeah, the first time I got to Oceanus, I was like, wow, these enemies are really spongy. Like, I don't remember it being like this in the first game. And, the better I got and the further I got in the meta progression and everything, eventually you get down to Oceanus and you're like, oh, yeah, I'm just fucking clearing these guys out. But that initial, like, jump was like, oh, wow, this feels like a significant jump in terms of, like, how many enemies they throw at you per room, but also how spongy they are. So, that was a bit surprising. But, yeah, I just really like how distinct each spot is. Like the Fields of Mourning I found super interesting. It's like, oh, it's just an open area and you run around and like you choose a door with 3 icons, and then within that space, not only are the 3 icons there, but sometimes you'll come across like a small group of enemies, they're guarding like 5 ash, and so you just kill them and you can just get an extra 5 ash, right? So that stuff is very, very fun to engage with, and I like it a lot. But yeah, that it's just, it opens up such a, like, my mind is like reeling with the possibilities of what they can do. So yeah, it's very exciting. So have you've beaten a downstairs run? What about an upstairs run?
I mean, this is spoilers. I guess can we say the boss? Yeah, so I've beaten Kronos downstairs, and I've beaten Eris, who is currently the last boss on the surface run. I've done each once. Eris was harder. I think.
Yeah, Eris is
a tough boss.
Eris is pretty nasty. I think so I've done both once as well. I've gotten to Kronos like 4 times now, and I've gotten to him, I'd say, twice with a good build, and one of those builds was the spinning axe one I talked about before, and I think because of the nature of the spinning axe, like, he's very quick, and so he will knock you out of that, or he will do damage while you are spinning quite easily, and so yeah, it's a little bit harder to get that one, or at least it was for me to get that one going. But the one I won with was wild. I was using the skulls.
The skull, right?
Which I guess we can talk about the other weapons now as well. But the weapons, the torch, the skulls, the axe, those are the three that weren't in the tech test. And the skulls are so weird. Like, they are, I guess, this mix of the shield and the gun from the first game, where your special is like a kind of shield bash, and your...
Well, if so you were saying you were not a huge fan of the cast in the first game, which, by the way, I would encourage you at some point to go back to the first game and try a cast build, because some of them are nuts. They're wild. They're
I'm sure,
fun.
yes, yeah.
But if I were to compare the skull to anything, it's basically like a kind of supercharged version of the default cast in the first game, because you've got these 3 resources that you have to then go and pick up. I don't know if I love it. I got to play around with it more. But
you know what's really funny is, like, I got the 2, so the torch and the skull, they're both very weird weapons generally, I think.
Torch is the weirdest, I would say, actually. But
yeah, torch, I don't love. I think it's my least favorite weapon, the torch. I don't love it.
It seems to be the community's, like, in general, least favorite weapon. I have a feeling they're going to patch it in some way, adjust it, but yeah.
I think they got to adjust it. I think they got to tweak it. It feels underpowered and also a little chaotic and random in a way that is hard to build around, I think. But it's very funny because I didn't love it.
It's not super fluid either.
Yeah, I didn't love it, but then I got further than I'd ever gotten when I first used it, so I was like, okay, that's a little weird. But yeah, the skull, I think it was my second time using the skull, I got to Kronos and beat him with the skull. I think I just came across a build that worked really nicely, which was it was Aphrodite, so it was like the close-up one, and if you're with the skulls close up, you can just keep spamming them because they automatically go back into you. And I also had the hammer ability that gave me 2 extra skulls, so I had 5 skulls to work with, which was very nice. So I was just like spamming my regular attack on him, and yeah, that did the business. That was really good.
The Omega Special is really strong on the skulls as well. That's a crazy move.
Yes, the Omega Special is the fully charged up dash move, right? And then it like blasts out the side of it as well.
Yeah, where you shoot out those things from the side of you as well. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, that one's good. Yeah, the attack, the Omega attack on the skulls, I didn't use that much, and I think is a little underpowered as well. That one feels like it needs a bit of tuning.
Because it's like a slower version of the special from the rail in the first game, sort of, but it feels like much slower. There's kind of too much delay.
Yeah, exactly. So it feels, again, I think it's like they've definitely built all of these weapons with that idea of preparation and just like deliberateness in mind, but I think some of them definitely need a little bit of work in order to get them to where they should be. So like the base attack on the torch feels so weak, and then you also have to hold it down for
no, the special's just better. This, like, you spam the special and it's a stronger attack and it's easier to hit with. From what I've heard from some of like the community, like, do you know Halion? He's one of the big like
I do,
Hades speedrunners, and yeah, I've seen him in videos say, like, don't even use the attack, just spam the specials, which is probably not what you want from your weapon.
No, exactly. Like, I think that it's a nice idea, and especially the holding down to like get a more powerful version, but it takes so long to hold it down, and the frequency with which you shoot the torch, the regular attack, just is not that quick. And so yeah, I was finding myself, and you have limited movement as well when you're doing it, so it's much harder to, you're slower, you're a easier target to hit, and you're not outputting as much damage. So yeah, that's one of those points of like, by the time this is 1.0, I'm sure the torch will be great. I'll love the torch, but right now torch is not quite where it needs to be in terms of like its power. So
what's your favorite weapon?
I really like the regular staff a lot. I think that one's very solid.
It's grown on me.
I like the axe.
I like it.
Axe is good fun. It's just like big and powerful. I would say probably. I think the first 3, like the daggers, the staff, and the axe, are definitely my favorites. I think torch needs work, and the skull is just weird and interesting. I like to play a bit more with the skull because I think there's some fun things you can do with it. But yeah, the cool ones are quite good.
The knives are my favorite, I think, or the dual blades.
Yeah, knives are really good.
They're so strong.
I had a run today. Okay, and speaking of stuff that just like, I'm still seeing weird and new stuff. So I got to Cersei today, and the surface. So I actually beat Eris for the first time this morning.
Oh,
and
nice.
I was using the aspect of Melanoe for the dagger and the
That's the big gives you
sickle.
backstab damage, right? I think
Backstab damage,
yeah.
yes. And I got an ability that I think was a hammer ability for the dagger that came boomeranged back to you, hook shot I think it's called. And so you would throw it and it would
Oh, on the special, right?
On the special, yes. And so you'd throw it.
No, that's one of the best hammers in the game. It's really strong.
It's really good, especially because I'd upgraded the aspect of Melanoe to like 5 to its maximum, and so the backstab damage I'm getting on the way back is fucking crazy. And so I'm just like flinging these things out, getting the backstab, especially with the special on those as well, just going crazy. And so I get to Cersei, and one of the things that she offers me, which by the way, the number of fucking characters of like we were saying before, there's a room with different characters in every single biome, and then you have people like Heracles who just shows up,
or Artemis,
and then you have fucking Artemis and Icarus. Fucking Icarus shows up, and he has a whole set of things as well. Like, it's crazy the amount of like helpers and different boons you can get from those individual people.
You found the one in the first biome on the surface? Have you found that character yet?
Yes, Medea, right?
Medea, yeah.
Yes,
that was shocking to me because I had done a bunch of runs in that biome and died. And I'm like, what the hell? It's got the little hands icon that you're gonna get a helper. What is this? And she showed up.
Yes. I think they deliberately do that because when you first get to Tartarus, which by the way, one of my favorite moments of this game is getting to Tartarus and you land and you're like, oh, it's the beginning of the game. You go back to Hades 1, like, and the way they do the fucking music at the end there, like the theme, like the way they weave it in with this time stuff is just, it's so good. Like, musically and just like thematically, the way like the final Charon shop is literally the area that you begin your run in Hades 1, and then you dive into the water to dive out of the pool back like you usually would when you died in Hades 1. All that stuff is just so fucking good. But back to the run that I had, right? So I was using the backstab damage. So then I get to Cersei, and the ability that she gives me is you get bigger and you do 15% more damage. I'm like, huh?
Yeah.
Huh? Okay. So I take it, and all of a sudden, Mel is like larger, and when she talks in conversation, her voice has like a modifier, and it's deeper. And I'm like, what the fuck? This is insane. Like, the little things, like the little details like that are unbelievable. The fact that I've played 25 hours of this game, and I get there and I see that, and I'm like, I've never fucking seen that before. Yep. Like, it is so funny, especially like you have like serious dialogue with Eris like at the end, and I'm just like, she just sounds like she's on helium or some shit. Like, it's really funny that it's like all that stuff has been like layered in and thought about. And I was half expecting it to be like for someone to make a jab about it and be like, oh, your voice is different. I feel like that dialogue is going to be in there somewhere. There's going to be a moment of you taking that and then someone's going to mention your voice sounding funny, because that's the kind of like attention to detail that they pay when making that kind of stuff happen. But yeah, I mean, added on to that, like, I had a moment today as well when I went back. So you can, if you go from the crossroads to like the starting area where you do your Arcana cards and stuff, if you go back to the crossroads, sometimes things just change. And so I came back and Hecate was just like chanting at the pot. And you go up there and you can press A and you just join in with the chant. And so the two of you are just chanting, and you just, it doesn't really do anything, but like it's this very cool moment of like, everything feels so natural and integrated, and just like things are just happening around you. I was just like, wow,
I've never seen that.
Just new things,
cool.
Constantly new things. Yeah, exactly. So yeah, I don't know what your experience has been like with like having people show up at the crossroads as well, of like, oh, now Nemesis is having a conversation with Eris in the top corner, or like the fucking hot springs, right? Like they knew what people were doing with with fan art, but they were like, let's fucking, we gotta lead into this shit. Do you know what the Greeks were known for? Fucking bathing. All right, so here we're gonna bathe with some of these characters, with new art as well, like the art that they have for those characters in the hot springs. Oh my god, it's so good. It's really good.
It's amazing. How many of those little story sequences have you gotten, either in between runs after you die, when you go to certain areas and stuff? Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yes. So like the first
Yeah.
one is young Mel as like a 5-year-old or whatever running around.
Yes. Yes.
That one. Yeah. So have you got the you must have got the other one, right? Where it's a flashback to what happened with Kronos.
So I'm thinking of two.
Oh, okay. So the one that I'm thinking of is the Hades flashback.
Yeah, where you play as Hades.
When you start moving around as Hades, I was like, what the fuck? This is insane.
And of course, since it's a family game, Hades can dash. So apparently, this is just what the Hades family line does. They dash.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. So that was really because I think in the patch notes they were like made it more obvious that you are controlling Hades when you get to that sequence.
I did see that.
Yeah, and I was like, oh right, yeah. I'm sure a lot of people were like, what's going on? Oh wait, oh I'm Hades. You know, like that was very good, and I enjoyed that a lot. And I don't know the next one you're talking about. Actually, I don't know if I've come across another one.
So I got that one before. I feel like you've probably seen it because it was relatively early for me when. There's that weird like Chronos scene where you're battling and I don't even remember exactly what it is in your memories or something, and you're battling in the second like lava area. I don't remember the name of it from Hades 1.
Yes.
And you're fighting
So
like Hades 1 enemies and stuff. Yeah.
It's a game mechanic thing I think that will probably come back again, but Chronos randomly will just because I've done it twice now. I actually died in Asphodel the second time that he threw me there. But yeah. So like he will just randomly, you know, I don't know what causes it, but he will come in there and he'll grab you and he'll be like, right, off you go, and he throws you into Asphodel, and you have to do this essentially challenge where you have to stay within a circle and build up a percentage on the circle while fighting the enemies from Hades 1 in Asphodel. It's so cool, and I think that's the type of thing you were talking about before of like people should play Hades 1 first, because stuff like that is not going to have an impact unless you have played the first game, right? No. So yeah, all that custom stuff is just so cool and like surprising. And yeah, like the first time that Heracles just like appears and he's like, right, I'm gonna fucking do this. And Nemesis is such an interesting one as well, where like I swear really there's been like 12 different types of things that Nemesis does. Either she's in a room and already cleared it, or you fight her to see who's the best, like you did with Thanatos in the first game. Or she is randomly at a shop. Has she done this before? Where you're at a shop with Carol and she fucking buys.
Yeah,
she buys the item you're gonna buy. Like what the fuck? Like stuff like that.
Or blocks off like oh my god, look, it's a Hera boon or whatever, and I'm doing a Hera build, and then that asshole takes that path and you can't go.
Yes. Yeah, she takes the door. And then there's sometimes where she just like offers you, she's like, oh, do you want to trade this for this thing instead? And so you can trade her. Like,
oh, I forgot about that. I've only gotten that once or twice, but yeah, she does do that.
Yeah. Like, it's insane. Like the amount of like custom little event things like that with just that one character. She does like so many different things. It's so cool because it feels like every run I've had of Hades 2 has felt like something new different. Has happened, right? Which is kind of astonishing, honestly. Like,
yeah, I want to reiterate. I know we all know, and the listeners know this, but I do want to reiterate. At the time of recording, this game has been in early access for 2 weeks, I believe. The fact that there's this much, and you would imagine, especially knowing Supergiant, this is the kind of thing that as they continue to introduce more characters and things like that, you would have to assume there will only be more of these events in the finished product, and probably more frequently.
Yes.
So, I mean, it's mind-blowing. It's mind-boggling. How are these people? I saw something the other day. I may be fudging these numbers a little bit, but they were talking about, you know, Hades 2 and stuff like that, and they're like, yeah, we've increased the size of the company after the first game. We're now at like 25 or 30 people or something. I'm like, oh, right, yeah. Of course, fucking 25 people, probably including like, you know, QA people and stuff like that who are critical to a game's development, but, you know, not like doing binary or whatever. But 25 people in the company have made this.
Yeah, I think that's including their like marketing team as well, which is crazy because they're self-published and everything.
Right, the art team and stuff too, like all that.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
It's just, I mean, it's what the hell is our AAA is doing. This is insane. It's insane.
Well, right. I think it's just testament to what a lot of people have been saying about the games industry more widely, which is good games come from teams who stay together, who learn from experience, who make games for years and years. Like, why is Zelda games so good? It's because all those people have worked at Nintendo for 25 years. Or the From games. Yeah, or the From games, right? They keep their teams. They don't lose that knowledge, that inherent understanding. And so Supergiant, a team that's been together for 15 years at this point, like, they have built over 5 games a solid structure and team who understands and knows what they're doing to the point where they can put out something like this. And obviously it's going to be great because they have all that wealth of experience and have not been laid off or thrown to the winds and like left the industry, right? Like,
or fear of that, really.
Exactly, or fear of that, right? Because they are independent and they stay independent, and they've been very lucky to have that success. I think Hades comfortably has secured their future for the next 40 years probably. The amount that game has sold and how well it's done, and this game as well will do likewise. But I think it says so much when you see a game like this and how well made it is and how well crafted it is. It speaks to the people, right, and keeping people around.
No, and I think you see now. So I am not like the biggest early access guy. I've played a number of games in early access, but I think you know this, but Hades 2 is the exception, not the rule, right?
Yes,
the fact
absolutely,
that the game is this feature rich and complete, day one in early access is not how it typically goes. But they are the poster child for successful early access release, because not only it's a win, a million wins for them, because they get to have a steady stream of income that they can continue to fund and do these ambitious ideas that they have, while simultaneously getting community feedback. I mean, it's an incredible loop that they've built here, and it's perfect for a game like Hades. Because if you had a purely linear story-based game where it's here's 40% of the game, the rest of remaining 60% yet to come, that's different than a game like this. So it works out well, and it's cool being part of the conversation. It's almost like with a game like Hades, when they do these major updates. In the first game, they did them every 2 or 3 months, if I remember, a major update. There'd usually be a title to the update as well. But it almost feels like you're watching, I don't know, House of the Dragon is coming back. House of the Dragon every week, and it's oh, it's cool. It's not the binge model of Netflix. It's you get to remain a part of the conversation. So I really enjoy that.
Yeah, it's really cool, and I'm very much looking forward to when updates come and you just jump back in and you're like, oh, what's new, what's changed, right? Which is great, because I think Hades is one of those games that I played a lot within a condensed period of time, but it is a forever game in a way that I would like to always just come back to, and I think this necessitates me coming back to it over the course of a year at least, right? Which is very, very nice. The one kind of thing that really just put a massive smile on my face with this game, more so than anything, was getting to that second boss fight. I think Skilla and the Sirens is maybe the best thing in this entire video game. It is unbelievable, especially down to the way that in Oceanus, that entire biome, you are hearing slowly the vocals come in louder and louder the closer you get. And you're like, what's going on? There's some singing happening. And you finally arrive there, and they're like, all right, let's fight. And then you start. And, the first time I got there, I was I'm bedraggled, almost dead. And they start playing that song, and I'm like, what the fuck? This is so good. And I was literally just dashing around, trying to stay alive just to hear more of the song. I was I know I can't beat this, but I just want to stay alive to hear more of this. Dude, the fucking most shocking thing, again, getting back to them 7, 8, 10 runs later, and them being I wrote a new song. It's called I Want to Claw Out Your Eyes and Drown You to Death. And I'm like, oh, that's a funny line. And then, the dialogue ends, the fight starts, and a different song starts playing, and you realize that it is fucking I'm going to claw out your eyes and drown you to death. I'm like, oh my god, this is fucking genius. It is absolutely incredible. It just one of the best moments.
Killer voice acting, too. The voice actress for Skilla, amazing. She does an amazing job.
So good. And like I think
And the
every
fight itself is like brilliant too. The fight
yeah, the fight is so much fun. Like I think it's one of the best boss fights I've done in like a decade. Like it is so good and well designed in terms of like the three different characters and balancing between them, and
Yeah.
the fact that when you take one of them out, their part of the track disappears, and so like you can get to the point where it's like just Skilla singing or just the drums going or just the guitar. Like it is so well put together.
And the solo feature in like the second half of the fight
Yes,
there is really
featured
cool.
artist,
Yeah,
right?
featured
Like,
artist. Yeah.
just taking that idea, because the myth of Scylla and Charybdis is like the thing that's associated with the Odyssey, right? And I was like, oh, Scylla and the Sirens, and then later on the fucking
Charybdis.
surface
As a mini
run,
boss.
you come across Charybdis as a mini boss. I was like, oh shit, he is in the game, because I thought they were going to do like a Scylla and Charybdis thing, but it's like Scylla and the Sirens, and then Charybdis is his own thing. But which I thought was very, very clever, and again, like the Odysseus stuff all coming together as part of that. But yeah, that is every time. It's like in the original game, every time I got to Eurydice's chamber, no matter how many times I'd been there, I would lay down the Switch and listen to a full version. I'd listen to her sing through the entirety of the song.
That's
I did,
great.
yeah, I loved it. I absolutely loved it. And it's a similar feeling here, only I have to fight while I'm listening to it. But I'm trying to like extend out the fight so I can hear more of the song, like it's so fucking good. Like it's absolutely one of my favorite things in a game I've come across in years. Is like getting to that fight the first time and then getting to it again and having another song. Like unreal. Just so good.
I hope they do more. I would be.
Yes.
I think they probably will, but that would be great.
I think we need just an entire album. I just need
An album, a
Scylla
Skill
and
and the Sirens album.
Yeah, 100.
Yeah.
I would fucking buy that shit sight unseen. Like, oh my god.
Also, just a huge improve. I would say the boss fights in general are a big improvement over Hades 1 because honestly, I think if you were to point to any singular flaw in Hades 1, the boss fights are okay. Like they're good. They're solid. They're all right. Like, the Bone Hydra is like fine.
Yeah, like some points really annoying, especially when you are not used to fighting Theseus and the Minotaur. It's just like, you pieces of shit. Like, especially the shield with Theseus, I always got really annoyed by.
Oh my god, so annoying. Yeah.
Yeah.
What I was gonna say is Scylla and the Sirens is a much better version of the like you have to balance more than one enemy type of boss fight than Theseus and the Minotaur are in the first game.
Agreed. Yeah, I think so. And yeah, like they all feel much more distinctive. Like the big Cerberus fight is such a spectacle. Like there's such scale to it, such a big arena, and like you get kind of zoomed out a lot more. And he's just a big target, which just means he's easier to hit, but he has a lot more health, right? And so it's just it's much different kind of approach. And then Kronos is just like kind of a crazy fight in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
Like the way that he uses time manipulation and the way that he like strikes the air and then there's like a half second and then it does damage, like some of that stuff is very clever and like thematically tied in, which I think is really good.
The second phase, like standing on the particular hour on the clock to avoid the insta-kill attacks. Yeah,
I've seen a lot of people talk about how like Supergiant must have played some Final Fantasy 14 because that's like a very MMO 14 style mechanic where it's like indicate this spot and then you do it. I did find that a little unreadable when I first did the fight because I was like, I don't know what I'm supposed to do. So like I used all three of my death defiances. Like the first fight I had against him, I think I could have won if I'd known where I was supposed to stand, but I just didn't. So I just completely died on it, unfortunately. But once you know, I think it's fine enough and you can get it. But yeah, he's definitely a big challenge.
This is a little bit of a non sequitur, but this is something I've always thought and never had the opportunity to talk about because no one fucking played this game. I'm pretty sure you did. In Hades 1, and almost even more so now in Hades 2, there is such a Kid Icarus Uprising DNA in this game.
Okay.
Right? Have you played Kid Icarus or no?
I have, yeah. I played it a long time ago, but yeah, I did enjoy it a lot. And I was not very good at it, and so I ended up turning the difficulty down a lot in that game. But like the way in which conversations happen and like the dialogue is all really funny, and it's probably one of the best written Nintendo games of all time, generally. So that was the highlight for me from that game.
Yeah, no, I think like Hades and especially Hades 2 has that along with like unique dialogue. If you have like particular weapons, or if you go back to different areas and things. Even the way that the heat system, and in this game, the what is it, the something
It's like
I
yeah, I
the
can't remember the
will.
name of it. Incantations or something like that, maybe. But yeah, it's
The
like a
heat
specific
replacement.
like
Yeah.
that. Yeah, it's like the weapon is tied to a character or a boss, and so you have to go to that
You
boss.
get the nightmare stones or whatever from it. Yeah,
Yeah,
and kill
yeah,
it.
exactly.
Regardless, but the way
Which I've
the
only done one of those so far, but yeah.
I haven't done one yet, but the way the difficulty scales in Hades seems like kind of an extrapolation and expansion from the way the
Huh.
difficulty works in Kid Icarus. I that's how I've always
That is
felt.
very interesting. Yeah, because I guess the heat system is quite similar to what Sakurai
Which
did.
then they ended up bringing into Smash.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's yeah. I never thought about that. That's really interesting. Especially like, obviously, Kid Icarus is a what do you call it? A mythologically adjacent game in that way, also. So
Greek.
yeah, that's yeah. It is Greek. It's all Greek. Yeah, that's really interesting. Actually, I never really thought about that. But you're right. There's actually a lot of
A lot
weird
of DNA.
similarities between Kid Icarus and Hades. So very very cool. Yeah, I think the bosses, some of them have like some balanced stuff. I think I definitely think Kronos is
Yeah,
significantly more
Polyphemus.
difficult than Hades. Polyphemus I think has
Hitboxes are
big
really
issues in
weird.
terms of his jumping thing that I always get hit by, which is a little bit of a pain. And then Eris is like
Even the little wave that he like stomps the ground and it does like
yes,
an AoE circle wave attack, which a lot of games
yep,
do that. Like I'm prepared for that kind of attack, but there are a lot of instances where I felt like I dashed through it and still took damage.
uh huh,
So I don't know.
yeah.
I don't know about you. Did you run into that?
I definitely did. He also has another like smash the ground AoE that like goes in like it's like circles of spikes kind of that go outwards, and
Yeah,
those
it's fast
ones
too, right?
just
The quick
the
attack.
speed on them, I think the speed is just a bit too quick for you to even react to is the problem there, right? So
Do you find as well, not Polyphemus, I'm wondering if they're doing this right now because she's technically the final boss of the surface, but Eris
right.
feels, not only does she hit insanely hard, her health pool
Mm-hmm.
is like massive. Like she's got a
Yes.
huge health bar.
Yeah, she definitely feels a little unbalanced.
I don't know if, as I said, if it's inflated.
Maybe, yeah, it could be the case for the current early access, right? Because they know that this is the final thing before they're going to cut you off and say, "Oh, come back later for more." Maybe they are doing that deliberately, but yeah, I think if that's the actual way she is in the final game, I think a lot of people are going to get discouraged when they get to her and be like, God, and I've got a whole nother area after her to go as well. Like,
Yep.
a lot of people are going to be like, I don't want to do this, So, but I don't know. Today's run against her was surprisingly easy. Maybe I just had the right build, but like I was giant Mel doing more damage with the fucking backstab of the daggers, and like also I had on my special the I think it was the Hephaestus boon that sometimes does 400 damage randomly every 20 seconds or whatever. So that does big chunks to bosses. And yeah, that was proccing quite a lot. So yeah, I was able to take it. I also had freeze on my regular attack, so slowing her down, which made her easier to deal with, and all that stuff. I kind of I beat her without using a Death Defiance, which I was like, oh wow,
Wow.
I've
Okay.
not done that at that point. So yeah, maybe, I don't know. Maybe it is I'm just getting better at it, or maybe I just had the right build. But yeah, she was a lot easier today than she has been in my previous runs, where she's felt like pretty challenging and like a hard hill to get over, basically. So
Have you had any favorite gods or boons and things that you like to use?
yeah, I like Aphrodite. I do like her attack stuff. I think that does a lot of damage a lot of the
She
time.
seems a lot stronger than in the original game to me.
Yes, I also really like her cast that kind of drags people into it. I think that one's quite fun as well. Yeah, like I don't know. There are certain combos that work really nicely. I do like Demeter with the freeze stuff. I think that's really helpful. Any boon also that just
Her dash is nice. I really like her sprint.
yes, her sprint is good. Any boons that cut through armor more easily, I'm always going to go for. So those are always useful. I think that's hammer ability maybe more so than anything
They're
else.
generally but the armor hammer abilities feel a lot more useful in this game than they do in the original.
Yeah, especially because they're specific per weapon. That they do more interesting, weird stuff. I think that more fundamentally changes like the way your weapons work, which I think is very helpful for certain situations. We haven't even talked about the fucking elemental system as well,
oh my God,
of like
yeah.
fire, rock, like the infusion stuff, right? Where like depending on, so each boon now has a different element associated with it, and if you basically, I feel like this gets over an issue of where sometimes you would get a god and you get some boons and you'd be like, I don't really care about any of these, I guess I have to take one. And now you can take the one that most helps your element that you're shooting for, where you can get these infusion boons that are like, if you have 4 rock elements, then you'll get an additional blah blah blah.
Yeah.
That stuff I think is very interesting because it gets rid of that issue, I think, of coming across a boon or a set of boons and being like, none of these work for me, but if you get the right infusion, then you can still benefit from it, right? Like, I think my winning run had an infusion that I had built up with fire, where every fire one I got added an extra power to my damage, which was like super helpful by the end.
That one's good.
Lot of stuff,
the water one is really nice. If you have, I think it's 4 or more water symbols, you get, I think it's 100 extra HP, which is a lot.
Wow.
That one has helped me. It's definitely one run.
Yeah, that sounds great.
Yeah. The rock one, I think it's like 5% bonus damage per rock earth symbol that you have, which is also really nice. Yeah, no, it's a cool system. It's something I would imagine they'll continue to expand upon, because right now it feels a little bit secondary to me, which it probably is the intention, but it's more like you're doing, I don't know, a Poseidon run, and you got a bunch of those water symbols, and all of a sudden you see one of those water infusion boons, and you're like, oh, that's cool, I can activate that, or if I can't activate it now, I likely will be able to in the future. So it does, as you said, if you're doing a Poseidon run and you come across Hephaestus or something, and he's got one of the boons that fits in with your element that you might not otherwise be super useful to you, you can take that and it can help you out. I'd like to see them expand upon it more, though. I really would.
Yes, definitely. Because I do think they come up rarely, and it's similar with like the duo boons.
I think one god only has one of those infusion boons each. At least I believe. I may be wrong, but I think it's just one per god.
I only just unlocked the ability to see all the boons in the menu, so I'll have to take a look at that as well and see.
But some of those duo boons are pretty good.
Yeah, there's also the hex, right, which I think we chatted a little bit about. Of like, the hex feels a little underpowered right now. Yeah, but like, there's so many systems. We haven't talked about the fucking the obsidian rock or whatever, the challenges as well. Like, that's another thing in this game. Like, there's so much stuff. Like, I've only done like one of those.
There's challenge runs now. Yeah.
Yeah. Like, they have specific rules and everything. Like, man. But yeah, that's what was the thing I was saying before the challenge run? The other thing that I forgot about. Hexes. So like, you have Selene, who is a new god.
Right, they replace your call.
Yes, exactly. Instead of your call, you now have the hexes. And I feel like the only good hex is the one that heals you, really. Like, the rest of them are like just okay, I guess. They can be useful sometimes. Like, the one that shoots a Kamehameha beam for like 1,000 damage is okay, but you're also rooted in place when you do it, and so you will take damage quite easily.
If you dash, it cancels it, I think.
Oh, really? Okay.
I believe so.
But then you just lose it. Yeah.
If there, no, I think there is kind of a reason we forgot the hexes until now, because I will say, if there's any singular system in this game right now that needs the most amount of work and adjustments, I think it's the hexes. Because I think they theoretically want you to be able to do like a hex build, which would be really cool. But the way they're currently implemented, they are not only like kind of weak, they also, like, sometimes you get that Kamehameha beam and it'll be like 200 magic per room. And you start with what? Fully upgraded, I think 90 magic?
Yep.
Yeah. It's over double.
It takes a long time to build it up, and
the payoff doesn't feel worth it. So
the payoff is not worth it at all. Yeah, exactly. Like, and some of them are just like, okay, so this one is 80 and it's only going to do 200 damage, and yeah, there's a lot of imbalance there, I think, with all of them. Like, there's one that turns you immortal for a bit, and then you can shoot, but like the beams on it feel a little slow, and they just don't usually connect sometimes. Like, I don't know, it feels like there needs to be rethinking done generally about like how helpful those are, because none of them feel that helpful right now.
The one I've found the most useful, other than the healing one, which is like, far and away the most useful, I think.
By far, especially because when you get to the star chart, you can add extra heals per fountain as well. It's also per fountain, like it's really good.
You're getting at least one in between areas, maybe 50-60% of the time you're finding a random fountain like in the actual biome, so you get a lot of heals.
And I think it's also the cheapest hex to activate.
I was just gonna say,
right? Like
I think it's what, it's like 70 or 80 magic,
it's 70,
something like that. It's pretty 70. Yeah, it's cheap. Other than that, the only other one I've found actually a little bit useful, not enough to like build a run around, which, as I said, I would think they want you to be able to do a hex run. That would be cool. But the only other one I've found useful is the like ground slam one, where you go up into the air quickly and slam the ground. It's useful just for like positioning and a quick, I think it's like 300 damage. So not crazy, but it's enough, and it's one of the cheaper ones too, that if you're doing like an Omega run and you happen to use, I think it's 80. I think that one is 80. Use 80 magic, you quickly reposition yourself either in or away from the fight, and it's a little bit of an AoE. That one's helpful, but not enough to, it's probably not going to win your run.
I think it says a lot. I think it says a lot that like when I go to the star chart, I always go for the points that are like, when your hex is not ready, dodge an extra 1%. I'm like, I'll take that. I'll take anything that when my hex is either when my hex is not ready or I'm not using my hex or whatever. Like, that's it. I think that's not a great system if that's what people are going towards. Yeah, exactly. But yeah, I think that's it's just yet another thing, right? It's just yet another thing that adds to just so many things in this game. And yeah, I've only done like one of the challenges so far, or two maybe, but I want to dig into that. And I think this is the tricky thing I'm finding now, is like, how much more do I want to play of Hades 2? I've played a good amount. Do I want to step away now? Because there is so much more I could keep doing. But like, here's the thing, I beat Kronos, and you get to walk into Zagreus's room, and then they're like, nope, we're not showing you anymore. And I'm like, God damn it. Like, I do want to get back to a point where I'm like not sick of beating Kronos, or like I don't feel like it's going to be a breeze, because I feel like eventually when we get to 1.0, if I've beaten Kronos like 20 times, I'll get there and be like, the impact of that first time with the narrative stuff is going to be a little bit lessened if I've done that. So yeah, it's a question of whether that's worth doing or not.
Yeah, I want to play a little bit more, especially now that there's this patch, but I think relatively soon I'm going to call it quits until the next major patch comes out, and then I'll play that for 10 or 15 hours and maybe keep doing that until the game releases. That's the goal. We'll see how much I can resist my Greek crack. Greek roguelike crack. But
yeah, exactly. And they sound like they want to try and keep save files as well, which is very admirable, and I hope they're able to do that.
They did in the first game, so I'd imagine they would in The only thing that didn't carry over in the first game, which makes complete sense, was, so in the first game, I think we talked about this a little bit personally, you could beat Hades, that was all in the game, but there was none of the Persephone like ending cutscene thing exploring her garden area, so you had to beat Hades 10 times still to get the full ending. But your save, your weapon aspects, your mirror upgrades, all that carried over.
Got you. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Great Steam Deck game too. You were mentioning that earlier. I've loved playing this game in bed, just laying down. Yeah.
It's perfect. Yeah, it really is just like such an easy thing to boot up. I think the thing that I always find interesting as well playing Hades is like, I'm always like, oh, I should play a podcast, but then I realize like every couple of minutes there's dialogue, and I'm like, actually, I just want to listen to the dialogue, and also the music is just yeah, the dialogue's great, and also the music is so good that I'm like, I'm just gonna listen to that. So like, you know, I think roguelikes a lot of the time for me become podcast games, but with Hades 2, I'm just like, I respect this game too much to do that to it, which is it's a funny thing, but I think it is worth it, honestly, because you get the full experience doing it that way, and yeah, it's very good. So yeah,
so it's good. Good game. Thumbs up.
yeah, I like
we like
Hades 2. It's a good video game. In case you didn't realize, after I was talking about it for 2 hours. So
game of the year 2025, probably.
I mean, it's my favorite thing I played this year so far.
Me too.
So, you know, which there's been some good stuff. Like I loved Infinite Wealth, Yakuza, or Like a Dragon Infinite Wealth, I should say.
Heard good things
which is
about
really,
that
really
one.
good. But yeah, there's. I think I was saying this. I can't remember where I was saying it somewhere, but I was saying like, you know, sometimes, you know, I'm just playing a video game to play a video game, and then a game comes along, and I'm like, oh no, this is why I play video games. And Hades 2 is that game where I'm like, this is why I play video games. This is like, I'm playing this because I just want to play the game, you know. And I think that's it's more a ringing endorsement than anything.
Yeah, I mean, it's amazing. It's incredible. It's not finished, obviously, but the fact that it feels as finished as it already does is like insane with how much stuff they're presumably going to add still.
Well, yeah, I look forward to more of it, and I'm sure we'll have you back on. We can chat about it when it comes out in 1.0.
Yeah, I hope Bally can play. Did he play Hades 1?
He did, yeah, and he really liked it. Yeah, he loved Hades 1. I think it was in his top 5 that year, definitely. Yeah, I know he's going to be itching to play it when it comes to a platform he can play it on. So I'm sure that will happen.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're going to wrap up here. But before we go, Devon, where can people find you and stuff you do out there on the internet?
You can,
or do you want people to find you?
That's a separate question. But
yeah.
you can listen if you like hearing my voice. You can listen to us on Emblemcast. We do a Fire Emblem podcast that I might be wrong. I think we just crossed I think it's the 8-year mark a few months ago.
Oh my god!
Is like,
wow.
Yeah, I know. Yeah,
jeez.
it's crazy. I also want to.
That means I've known you for like 8 years, because I think you reached out like around the time you were starting that show, I want to say.
Not too soon after. I think it was maybe 2 or 3-ish years. And we've talked about this separately. I've known about your stuff since back like friggin' Diamond and Pearl videos doing Wi-Fi battles and stuff.
Right.
Yeah, it's
wild.
It's crazy. Yeah, so you can find us, just type in Emblemcast, it'll come up on anywhere you listen to podcasts, except Spotify. I don't think we're on Spotify. Regardless, you can find us. I also want to mention, we have said this on our show. We're actually going to be recording the first episode without him tonight, so that'll be sad, but rest in peace to our co-host Keegan. He passed away a few months ago. Awesome guy. I mean, you knew him, NBZ, not as well as you know me, but great dude, and it's a true tragedy. So we miss him dearly. Yeah, absolutely. That's it was really, really awful to hear that. Yeah. Hopefully, keep the show going in his memory, and I think that's the plan. Yeah, sounds good. Lovely. Well, yes, do go and check that out. We'll be back here doing more video game things, talking about stuff, I'm sure, at some point in time. I have no idea when this is going. I think probably soon, relative to when this. It doesn't. You're listening to this right now on the internet. It's gone up. By the time it's gone up there, you don't need to hear about scheduling. Well, Bally and I'll be back talking about video games at some point. I don't doubt it. So you guys like those video games? You like those electronic toys? Yeah. They're pretty cool things. Until then, thanks everybody for listening. We'll be back soon. Until then, a goodbye.
love me.